That they meet each other, because I think personally they have very different views of what is happening in South Africa, and especially what is happening that side. I think President Donald hasn't been here yet, so he doesn't know what it's like to be in South Africa.
I think it's a very great opportunity for this discussion to take place, just because it's our country, we're proud of our country.
It is good that President Ramaphosa is going to set the record straight, but it would have been even better if he came to South Africa to have a better view of what he thinks South Africans actually love like and who they are.
The Chief Executive Officer of Afro-Continental Union Consult, Dr. Benjamin Ayagre, says tribal politics are continuing to dominate in Chad. His comment comes after Chad's former Prime Minister, Success Masra, was arrested following clashes between farmers from the Ngambaye community and Fulani headsmen after messages on social networks purportedly called on the population to arm themselves against other citizens. Masra is suspected of spreading hate messages on social media. He is a fierce critic of President Mahamat Deby. The Chief Executive Officer of Afro-Continental Union Consult, Dr. Benjamin Ayagre, explains.
It boils down to the question of which type of democracy we are implementing. A democracy where somebody is called an opposition against a certain government in itself breeds confusion, breeds conflict. And so a government will see the other opponent as a threat. And actually, this democracy that we are practicing, some of them are tied to tribalism and friendship, not because a nation must develop in diversity. In respect of our diverse backgrounds, a nation must devolve.
Sudan's ambassador to the United Nations has accused the United Arab Emirates of carrying out attacks on Port Sudan earlier this month. The ambassador Al-Harith Idris says warplanes and drones were launched from the Emirati Red Sea base. Idris says the alleged Emirati attack came one day after an airstrike by the Sudanese armed forces on the city of Nyala that targeted an Emirati warplane and killed 13 foreigners, including Qatar Emirati elements. Fighting has broken out between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces in the city of Omdurman across the River Nile from the capital Khartoum. The army says that it's close to clearing the RSF from the whole of Khartoum state, more than 2 years after the civil war began. BBC's Will Ross reports.
Omdurman has been the scene of heavy fighting throughout the 2-year war. Streets, homes, schools and shops are littered with ammunition and missiles, some of which are unexploded. The Sudanese army retook the capital in March and is still trying to secure all of Khartoum state. But that doesn't necessarily mean peace for the millions of civilians trying to rebuild their lives in the ruins. The Sudanese Air Force used to dominate the skies, but the paramilitary rapid support forces recently changed tactics and by using drones have been causing havoc in areas they don't control.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Manchester United as well as Tottenham Hotspur will meet in tonight's Europa League final. And Novak Djokovic says he couldn't get more out of his partnership with Andy Murray. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
Thanks to Jabulile Nkolele. Or Jabu Nkolele for driving us up until this point. The music maestro, they call him, I think he was saying that a clip there. Of course, he comes before Africa Rise and Shine and gets us to this point. Let's thank the team on Rise and Shine as well. Tato Maporoma today on technical production. On news is Onele Nsinzi. On our social media platforms, we're being handled by Talent Butelezi. On Econ later, we'll hear from Buntle Headbush. Sports is Musubudi Makura. On production is Slengiwe Mabaso. Joey Likhodi and Pumuzo Ramagadza. Let's get into our Africa Roundup now, where we take a look at some stories you may have missed that you need to be aware of in and around our continent, and also what you could expect in terms of developments going into this new day. We start in the country, South Africa, where we're broadcasting from, and the President Cyril Ramaphosa says high on the agenda when he meets U.S. President Donald Trump will be trade relations. Trump imposed high tariffs to several countries, including South Africa, when he came back into office. President Ramaphosa will engage with President Trump today in a much-anticipated meeting of the two leaders. President Ramaphosa spoke to reporters at the South African Embassy in Washington on Wednesday.
Good to see you.
What are you most looking forward in terms of making a deal with President Trump?
Well, we're always ready. We are hoping to have really good discussions with President Trump and his fellow government colleagues. I'm looking forward to a really good and positive meeting, and we're looking forward to a very good outcome for our country, for our people, for the jobs in our country, and good trade relations, and to normalize relations between our two countries. The trade relations are the most important. That's what has brought us here. We want to come out of the United States with a really good trade deal, investment promotion. We invest in the United States and they invest in us, and we want to strengthen those relations.
Fighting has broken out between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces in the city of Omdurman across the River Nile from the capital Khartoum. The army says it's close to clearing the RSF from the whole of Khartoum state more than 2 years after the civil war began. The BBC's Will Ross has more.
Omdurman has been the scene of heavy fighting throughout the 2-year war. Streets, homes, schools and shops are littered with ammunition and missiles, some of which are unexploded. The Sudanese army retook the capital in March and is still trying to secure all of Khartoum state. But that doesn't necessarily mean peace for the millions of civilians trying to rebuild their lives in the ruins. The Sudanese Air Force used to dominate the skies, but the paramilitary rapid support forces recently changed tactics and by using drones have been causing havoc in areas they don't control.
Tanzania's main opposition leader, Tundu Lissu, told his supporters to have no fear as he appeared in court on Monday on charges including treason, as President Samia Suluhu Hassan warned foreign rights activists against interference. David Doyle reports.
Kenyan activist Boniface Mwangi and Ugandan lawyer Agatha Atahaire had been held at the Central Police Station in Dar es Salaam, the Tanzania Human Rights Defenders Coalition said in a statement. They had travelled to the city to observe a hearing in the treason trial of Tanzania's main opposition leader, Tundu Lissu. Hassan, who is seeking re-election in October, says her government is committed to respecting human rights. But at the court on Monday, former Kenyan Chief Justice David Maraga, who had travelled to Tanzania in a show of solidarity, said the shrinking democratic space in East Africa is very concerning.
We have seen that in Uganda, we have seen it here in Tanzania, and even in Kenya, in one way or the other, we are seeing it coming with the kidnapping of even young people. We are very, very concerned about that.
With My Father's Shadow, Nigeria's first film in the Cannes Film Festival official selection, director Akinola Davis Jr. says he wanted to create something deeply personal. Alice Rizzo reports.
The film, competing in the Un Certain Regard category, was crafted alongside his brother, Wale.
And then after the success of our short film Lizard, we knew we'd have the privilege of making a feature, and we really needed to, I thought, to make something that had a sense of urgency and something that meant something to me, to him, to my family, to our community, I guess to masculinity in general.
Set in 1993, this semi-autobiographical feature unfolds over a single day.
But Mama said we shouldn't leave the house.
Davis aspires for the film's presence at Cannes to pave the way for more African films to reach such platforms. Putting out hundreds of movies a month, Nollywood is the world's second most prolific film industry after India's Bollywood.
And that's how we come to the end of today's segment of the Africa Roundup.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Protesters in Ghana have accused the country's president of violating the constitution and interfering in the independence of the judiciary. Eric Mawena Egbeta, the opposition protesters calling for the reinstatement of Tokonu.
The presidency and the president and all of its spokespersons around the seat of government have had one narrative and one narrative only, that no constitutional breaches have occurred in the process up until now, which has resulted in the suspension of the Chief Justice. In fact, it does appear the government has already communicated to these protesters that we're not interested in having the Chief Justice return and fill her position until the determination of the matter. We believe that she must remain suspended for the investigations to take place, after which the final determination will inform whether or not she returns.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
So from Africa Roundup, where we give you an entire overview of the continent, we zoom into West Africa now, bringing you some stories making headlines in this region of the continent. And we're joined by political analyst and conflict resolution expert, Dr. David Matsanga. Doctor, always great catching up with you. How are you this Wednesday?
Thank you very much. Good morning, South Africa. Good morning, the entire Africa. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for making time. Let's start with at least 20,000 people who have fled the town of Mati following a surge in militant attacks. And this is in northeast of Nigeria. What can you tell us about what's happening there?
Thank you very much. First of all, Nigeria is a state without a state, a country without a country. Too many roaming bandits, terrorists, Al-Qaeda, name everything that you want to associate with Nigeria. The northern part of Nigeria is not worth going to. It is a place you must avoid. Any citizen in the world must avoid going to northern Nigeria, because you can be kidnapped anytime. You can be taken anytime. You can be killed anytime in northern Nigeria. So it is not a surprise, therefore, that 20,000 people have been killed in that area without the government taking firm decision to rout out terrorists, Al-Qaeda, the remnants of ISIS that are roaming in the Sahel, Boko Haram, Sahel region. What the government of Nigeria has not done is even to call for outside international help if its army is not able to contain the situation in Nigeria. In short, Nigeria is a country without a country and a state without a state.
So if this situation is not able to be contained, this seems like they would be qualified as refugees, these 20,000 people who have fled. What will now happen to them in Mati?
There are so many internal displaced people in Nigeria. There are so many people invading people's farms, herders from Fulani tribesmen and other people areas coming to take over farms. This is not the first group of refugees, my dear sister. This is among the many thousands and thousands of refugees that are internally displaced because of internal strife, because of the type of arrangement that Nigeria has fallen itself into. The 1914 agreement of Captain Lugard put this nation together without understanding what the situation is. What Nigeria needs right now is a political solution, not a military, not a judicial, not anything. It can't solve it. There are states in Nigeria that cannot stay together ever. They will never stay together.
Talking of solutions, let's move to Equatorial Guinea and Gabon. The United Nations top court having sided with Equatorial Guinea in a standoff with Gabon over 3 islands. And this battle that began since the early 1970s. Earlier, the International Court of Justice, or the ICJ judges, ruled that Equatorial Guinea has a legal claim to this group of small islands in the Gulf of Guinea. These are oil-rich waters. Is it a surprise that there would be this friction?
I am not surprised. I'm not surprised because there is quite a lot of difficulties around that region, including Cameroon. You remember Cameroon is a place where people just grabbed southern Cameroon without even having an agreement in the UN, in France, in Britain, in nowhere. The Secretary General of that region, who was mapping the entire region, died in a crash, an aircraft that killed him in 1961 in DRC around there. So Equatorial Guinea has been struggling just as states around there. You remember the fight between Cameroon and Nigeria over the oil region. Now Equatorial Guinea and Gabon, these are states that are now being brought in because of the mercantile, democracy, the type of transactional democracy that is coming out. But ICJ rules and it gives you the opinion. That opinion now stands. It is up to the two countries to go back. There is no enforcement. Nobody is going to enforce to go in with troops or warrants to say, get this done. The two countries now have to go back down on table, sit down as African countries, share the oil, share the proceeds, and we move on.
So this ruling is not final, nor is it binding. The two countries will still have to...
The ICJ ruling is not binding. The ICJ ruling is not enforceable. It is binding, but not enforceable. You can't enforce it by any... You can't tell the country, if you don't do this, I will arrest you. If you don't do that, I'll do this. No. Enforcement by ICJ ruling, but the binding remains there. It is a paper binding that says these islands don't belong to you. Therefore, it is up to the other person who was claiming to say, okay, fine, I've gone. But there is no force that is going to come. Maybe America is the only one that wants to take Ecuador or take Salvador or the Panama, which wants to take it under Greenland. Trump is eyeing to occupy Greenland. He can use his power, but not enough in the ICJ ruling. It is binding. Yes, you can pay back. Yes, but the only thing they can do is to give you sanctions if they find that you have not done anything, but not anything enforceable like a military occupation or removal of one party who was there.
And this dispute has been decades long, as we said. It was from the 1970s already. What was Gabon basing its side of the claim on?
Gabon was facing, because the maps, just as like the Somali and the Kenyan border boundaries, the map in the ocean, you don't know why some people I didn't study. I passed geography very well with a high distinction in my O levels in 1974, but I don't know how the maps of the ocean, angle. So Somalia was claiming that theirs is a straight. Another one was saying no, it's horizontal. Another one vertical. So that type of gymnastics by imperialism that was brought by the French. Don't forget, here we have a problem there. One country that has created us all this, that has collected all our maps for oil. You know the maps are not kept in Britain. You in South Africa might think the maps are kept in Britain. No, all world maps are kept in Paris. While the British were colonizing and taking land, the French were looking for minerals and oil especially. And therefore they kept all these maps. Now they come out and say, hey, if you touch this, we shall touch this. You know this is this. They even put in a lot of effort in Gabon to go to this court. There was no need of going to this court. We have African Union constitutive arrangement. We should have finished this thing within the African Union if AU was working at all. But AU is dead, waiting for burial.
Let's move to Senegal now, where a former Senegalese government minister was charged this week on allegations of stealing COVID-19 funds. So Salimata Diop is at the center of this case. She was Minister of Women at the time. Was she acting alone in this embezzlement?
No, she wasn't acting alone. She was working with Macky Sall. If I were the president, I've told that young man across there, the two of them, I fought for their release. You saw me on your radio station, your television station, arguing, telling the Macky Sall to release them. I have told them that there are two things you can do to keep Senegal going. Either you do what we call a redemption strategy, forget, let people come and say truth and reconciliation. I'm sorry, I did this, I did that, I'm sorry. If they don't do that, they are bound to be brought down by the French. Remember, Macky Sall was a French puppet. You remember, and he's still a French puppet, and he still has influence. So he could have not taken that money alone without he had a lot of appetite for money. Macky Sall was a Democrat. I knew him very well. Whenever we met. He likes money. That he went to Ukraine as the president of African Union. You know, you saw a man walking there trying to beg, just make a deal with Ukraine over grain. So she wasn't acting alone. The president should be brought in the dock. And if they don't do it, they better do reconciliation. If they don't do it, I think the French are on their way coming.
How much was embezzled? Do we know? And what will the next proceedings be?
Huge money, and plenty of money was taken. In fact, it's in billions of dollars, almost $1 billion taken out, because people benefited out of COVID, and it was one of the few countries that actually received more of these packages from African Union and from the Global Fund, because it was favored as a democratic state of the blue-eyed boy of Paris. He got a lot of money, and some of these things never reached the people, yet people died.
Let's move to Burkina Faso and Senegal. They are partnering and taking steps to strengthening regional security to combat terrorism and transnational crimes. I guess speaking to Traore's call for African solutions to African problems. What can you tell us here?
Yes. The two gentlemen, luckily enough, I'm one of the few people I'm blessed to have been a friend of Traore. I have even gone to Burkina Faso several times, and a friend, two younger men across. They listen to some of the advices some of us give. If they do that, they are going to win and clean, pacify West Africa from the terrorist organizations that have swamped, that are in this whole region of Sahel. That is a very good move. And Ibrahim Traore is doing it. That's why he's being hated by the French. The French don't like to see him because he's doing what they were doing badly. The French were even part of the people sponsoring these terrorists. You can see the way they are sponsored. They're even happy to see that Traore is finished. So they have been using that tag of saying terrorism, while at the same time siphoning uranium, siphoning our gold, our diamonds, all resources, taking them to Paris, then sell and give them back. So the people there, Traore is saying, no, let's strengthen our relationship. We are younger generation. The old generation of the Masangas is going away. We need to put up a generation that will defend Africa. We need a generation that will speak for Africa. And I encourage these young men, stand up, speak for Africa. We cannot be bullied. You see how Trump is bullying your president, calling him like a child. We don't like this in Africa anymore. We are fed up as Africans. When that time has come, we are not citizens with blue blood. We have red blood like these people. Time has come for us to stand up. We have not hurt anybody. But that is the spirit they are doing.
Off to Tanzania now, Dr. Matsungu, where the president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, has warned activists from neighboring Kenya that she will not allow them to interfere or meddle in her country's affairs. There's been quite a lot of media coverage in terms of support for the opposition leader in Tanzania, Tundu Lissu, from neighboring East Africa states. So President Samia has finally responded.
Yeah, let me tell you. First of all, I want to tell you, Madam Samia Suluhu is a very, very good person. I known her since 2008 when I was doing the ICC, when she was a Minister of Constitutional Affairs. I know her. The biggest problem that we have, and we have to face it, we have to say it now as Africans, is some of these mediocre opposition parties. What type of opposition do you have? The only opposition that we have in Africa is in South Africa. It can agree, goes home without throwing stones. Some of the opposition in Africa, in East Africa, is very bad. My country, for example, the opposition leader there can't write even a page. Can't even write a page of a policy. You are telling me that he can lead a man like Matanga. He can lead people who are educated. Opposition leader should be constructive. Should be constructive engagement. You cannot pop nose in everything. Each country has laws. We are in East Africa. But you can't keep on popping nose in Tanzania. Tanzanian constitution is very clear. One, once you win an election by percentage, there is no presidential petition. The constitution is there. It has kept the unity. Tanzania is the only united state in Africa where there has not been a war. Therefore, if you are taking there some funny tactics, old-fashioned imperial-funded regime change tactics, you will be taken. That is okay. Lissu is a man I pleaded with. We told Madame to bring her back home. Some of us pleaded with Madame that allow him to come home. As soon as he reached home, he started sessions of secessionism.
Well, just briefly, Dr. Matsanga, briefly before we run out of time completely, I mean, the activists in the region are concerned that Tundu Lissu's trial of treason might not be carried out in a fair manner. Do you think he will face a fair trial?
So if they go there, it will be tried what? Are they going to open their own court? There are people who are observing there. We don't go to Tanzania to interfere in their affairs. Do we come to South Africa?
Is it interference or support, Doctor? Is it interference or support?
The support, you can give your support constructively. Don't go with your negativity.
Right.
I am telling you.
Yeah.
I have been in this game more than those people.
Some
of them are
Doctor.
younger people.
Thank you so much for your time.
Go there positively.
As always,
Please.
It's always great to catch up with you. Dr. David, have a great day.
I am happy to tell you the truth.
Awesome. Dr. David Matsanga is political analyst and conflict resolution expert. Just zooming into West Africa. In our West Africa rep, I think it's East Africa today that we did actually, or we did both. All right. Well, anyway, that's some of the stories to look forward to in terms of what's making headlines. 6:30, we get our news headlines now. Here's Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headline. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and the U.S. President Donald Trump will today meet in a historic engagement since Trump returned to the White House in January. They are expected to discuss a number of issues, including trade, bilateral relations, and other pertinent matters between Pretoria and Washington. Fighting has broken out between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces in the city of Omdurman across the River Nile from the capital Khartoum. The army says it's close to clearing the RSF from the whole of Khartoum state. And the United Nations says no humanitarian aid has been distributed in Gaza despite the easing of Israel's 11-week blockade. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's get our first sports headlines, sports news rather, the full bulletin now on Africa Rise and Shine on this Wednesday. It's 6:32 Central African Time. Good morning, Musubudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Very good morning from the sports desk. Now following a 2-0 win over RS Bagan, or rather for RS Bagan over Simba SC in the first leg of the 2024-2025 Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup final in Bagan over the weekend. Attention will now turn to the return fixture on the island of Zanzibar this coming Sunday. So the match will be played at the Amam Stadium. RS Bagan go into the second leg with the advantage after early goals from Mamadou Kamara as well as Osama Lehui at home. But Simba SC have shown great fighting spirit already this campaign and will be confident of overturning that deficit. The winners of this year's Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup will be awarded a new trophy that will be unveiled later on this week in Johannesburg. On to this now. Uganda Cranes head coach Paul Pata summoned a 28-member squad ahead of two high-profile international friendly matches to be held in Morocco in the next coming weeks. Now the team will face off with continental giants Cameroon on the 6th of June before taking on the Gambia on the 9th of June. Of the 28 players called up, 12 are locally based in the Star Times Uganda Premier League, while the remainder ply their trade with clubs abroad, reflecting a strategic blend of homegrown talent as well as international experience. The selected local players as well as officials will convene at Fufa House in Mengo on the 22nd of June 2025. The contingent will then travel to Marrakesh a day later. All foreign-based players will link up with the squad directly in Morocco. These friendly matches form part of Uganda's preparation for the upcoming international competitions, and coach Paul Pat will be using them to assess the player readiness as well as the squad chemistry. Back home now, the newly crowned Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations champions Amajita are back in the country. They did arrive at the OR Tambo International Airport yesterday and were welcomed home by a small but boisterous crowd of supporters. Amajita recorded a 1-0 victory over Morocco in Cairo on Sunday to capture their first ever Under-20 AFCON title. The Kings of Africa also qualified for the 2025 Under-20 FIFA World Cup to be held in Chile later on this year. Now, SAFA President Dr. Danny Jordan says there's great respect for what this group of players have achieved for the country.
There's great respect for what South African football has achieved. And when you speak to the other federations, you will just see admiration and support for the progress that South African football has made. And we'll continue to work hard to achieve the ultimate goal, to get out one of our teams to win the World Cup. And I think that this Under-20 team, together with the players who are not there, that we know we'll have a team that can compete with the best in the world. And we look forward to Chile and the World Cup.
On to athletics news now. The Confederation of African Athletics Federation is satisfied with the inspection they have conducted in Abeokuta, the capital of Ogun State in the southwest of Nigeria last week, as preparations intensify for the highly anticipated Africa Under-18, Under-20 Athletics Championships that is scheduled for the 16th to the 20th of July. Now, the inspection team leader, CAA Director General Lamaine Fati, says the MKO Abiola Stadium is ready to welcome the rest of Africa.
No, it went very, very well because we arrived here and we do have the technical inspection the first day we arrived. But from what we have seen, really the stadium is ready to welcome Africa. Really, we have been very, 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 very happy to see the infrastructure well renovated and comply with the international rules. For that, we are very happy. And yesterday also, we did a lot of visit to the different hotels to see where our athletes will be accommodated and our guest participants. So, at the end of the day, we are very satisfied and very happy of our visit.
And finally, in tennis news, Novak Djokovic says he couldn't get more out of his partnership with Andy Murray, but is in no rush to find a new coach. The Serbian, who turns 38 on Thursday, parted company with the former rival Murray earlier on in May after 6 months of working together. Djokovic has taken a wild card into the Geneva Open, one of the final tournaments before the French Open, as he looks to find more rhythm on the court. The French Open starts this coming Sunday, with Djokovic seeking a standalone record 25th Grand Slam title. Djokovic has yet to win a match on clay this year, after also suffering early exits in Monte Carlo as well as Madrid before skipping the Italian Open. Now, lifting the title in Geneva would make Djokovic just the third man in the Open era to win 100 ATP singles titles, as well as to welcome a boost before Roland Garros. Djokovic is joined in Geneva by Dusan Vimic, who was previously part of his team, and the assistant coach as well as analyst Boris Bunzakovic. It's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Thulisile Buda, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Thulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of business as we say good morning for the first time on this Wednesday on Rise and Shine to Buntle Headbush. She's got our details.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
A very good morning to you too, Asanda, and good morning to our listeners. In our first look at the business news this morning, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says high on the agenda when he meets U.S. President Donald Trump today will be trade relations. Trump imposed high tariffs to several countries, including South Africa, when he returned to office. The president says Pretoria wants to increase trade with Washington.
Trade relations are the most important. That's what has brought us here. We want to come out of the United States with a really good trade deal, investment promotion. We invest in the United States and they invest in us, and we want to strengthen those relations, and we want to consolidate good relations between our two countries.
The Federation of Unions of South Africa, FEDUSA, wants, amongst others, for the public sector wage agreement to be maintained in the revised budget. Workers are hoping that the revised budget to be tabled today will be more people-centered and push for economic growth and job creation. FEDUSA, as well as COSATU and SAFTU, have urged the Minister of Finance to move away from austerity measures introduced in previous budgets. FEDUSA's Rifta Ajam has called for the reinforcing of frontline departments, which he says had been decimated by austerity budget cuts over the years.
We believe that austerity has failed in all results. It has only led to the destruction and the destroying of jobs. It has starved the public services, and the knock-on effect has been the general public out there that have been deprived of vital economic services, and it has only sought to widen inequality. So, in short, we will continue to reject this austerity budget, as we know that further cuts will only just have a ravaging effect on essential services.
Congolese minerals such as tungsten, tantalum and tin, which Kinshasa has long accused neighboring Rwanda of illegally exploiting, could be exported legitimately to Rwanda for processing under the terms of a peace deal being negotiated by the US. Kinshasa views the plundering of its mineral wealth as a key driver of the conflict between its forces and Rwanda-backed M23 rebels in eastern Congo that has intensified since January. It has accused Kigali of smuggling tens of millions of dollars worth of minerals over the border each month to be sold from Rwanda. U.S. President Donald Trump's senior advisor for Africa, Masad Bulo, earlier this month said Washington is pushing for a peace agreement between the two sides to be signed. Ethiopia has announced a comprehensive macroeconomic reform program to achieve sustainable economic growth and stability. The program includes measures to address foreign exchange distortions, balance of payments deficits, and inflation. Key elements include transitioning to a market-based exchange rate, modernizing monetary policy, and strengthening the financial sector. Founder and CEO of Pragma Investment Advisory, Meret Fikire Johannes.
The most anticipated one, and this has been cried by the market in terms of, which has been distorting the Ethiopia's forex price and also exacerbating the price between the parallel market and the official market. Is right now the official market is standing around 130 birr. The parallel market is currently standing around 150 birr for a dollar.
Nigerian fuel traders say they are struggling to secure gas supplies from two newly refurbished state-run refineries 6 months after they were declared operational. This has left them reliant on the privately owned Dangote oil refinery and imports. Nigeria has suffered years of fuel shortages and spent about $2.4 billion since 2021 to revive the long mothballed state-owned Port Harcourt and Warri refineries in the Niger Delta to end reliance on imported refined products. Now for a look at our morning financial indicators. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,600 naira 79 this morning. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 39. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 49. And in Zambia, it's at 27 kwacha 5. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 reals 65. In Russia, it's at 80 rubles 54. India, 85 rupees 51. China, 7 yuan 21. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 99 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Looking at the commodities this morning, gold is trading at $3,301 this morning and platinum at $1,047 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $66.37 a barrel. And those are your business news. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Bontle Hedbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
At 6:45 Central African Time, let's take a look at our G20 fact for this Wednesday, the 21st of May. South Africa will host approximately 130 working group meetings and 23 ministerial level meetings throughout the year, ahead of the country hosting the two-day G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg. This is from November 22nd, marking the first time the summit is held in Africa, and it's under the theme Solidarity, Equality, Sustainability. That's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
The 15th Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture, taking place this Saturday, the 24th of May in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, is set to reignite the spirit of the African Renaissance. The lecture will take place at the Julius Nyerere International Convention Center under the theme, The State of the Continent. Thabo Mbeki Foundation Chief Executive Officer Max Boqwana says preceding this flagship event will be a series of activities, including the Blue Economy Roundtable. Boqwana spoke to Channel Africa's Nhlanhla Mahlangu.
The foundation, a few years ago, took a decision that these various Africa Day lectures are going to take place around the continent. This is because the foundation might be based in Johannesburg, but it's actually a Pan-African foundation. And it was a foundation that was inspired by some of President Mbeki's colleagues. When it was first endowed by President Bouteflika of Algeria. And when President Mbeki was working with President Obasanjo, Prime Minister Meles, President Kufuor. So these were his colleagues that says, you need to set up a Pan-African foundation whose responsibility is to lift up and do advocacy around the work and the knowledge that has been produced by the AU in particular, because President Mbeki was central in that. So then, in that regard, we need to be very conscious that not everything that we're doing, we must do in South Africa. So we started 3 years ago and started moving the lecture around the continent. And then we started in West Africa. We started in Guinea-Conakry. There was a particular reason why we had to go to Guinea-Conakry. This is actually almost the birthplace of Africa's interaction with South Africa's liberation process. That's the place where President Mandela, President Mbeki's father, Governor Mbeki first went to for their military training. And later on, you will recall that that was where President Nkrumah ran to when he had difficulties in Ghana. This is the place where eventually Amilcar Cabral was assassinated. So it was politically and culturally and in terms of the revival, Guinea-Conakry was an important place to go. Then we thought then the next place will be East Africa. East Africa, when we come to East Africa, then Tanzania becomes a natural choice because of the great connection between Tanzania and South Africa and specifically President Mbeki himself. But you will note that there were South Africans that were in Tanzania when Mwalimu Nyerere was inaugurated as a president. There were South Africans that were working with him at that stage. But then that was followed by a group of women nurses coming from South Africa because the British decided that they will remove all their medical staff as soon as Tanzania became free. And it was at that point then that President Nyerere approached president of the ANC at that time, Oliver Tambo, to request or to ask him if there are any nurses within the ANC that can help, that can come to Tanzania to help re-establish the health system in Tanzania. Those nurses led by people like Mamkolega Tunyiswa actually came as early as 1961, 1962 to help establish the health system in Tanzania. Further than that, Tanzania became home for a number of exiles from the Pan-African Congress of Azania and to the ANC. And President Mbeki himself ran to Tanzania before he went to England. He actually flew from Dar es Salaam. From there on, Tanzania really became this close ally of South Africa's liberation struggle. On Thursday, we will be traveling to Morogoro. And Morogoro is an important historical site for an organization like the ANC that is facing serious difficulties today. At that point, when the Morogoro conference was held, there were very serious problems that the ANC was facing, and it became this place of revival. You will know that Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College is also here. And this was a place where many of the young people within the ANC were studying, and there were a number of camps, etc., etc. But even if you move to the post-liberated South Africa, then Mwalimu Nyerere kept this close contact with South Africa. You'll recall when he visited South Africa in 1999 to speak in our parliament, that he had an occasion to meet with President Mbeki. And President Mbeki made a request to him that one of the things that South Africa must take serious is this idea of catalyzing the renaissance of our continent. And he wanted President Nyerere to lead that. And President Nyerere's response was simple, that I'm ready when you are. So I'll do whatever I can, but you must continue that task. So in reality, that's the mission of our foundation. So we are hosted here today and this whole week by the Nyerere Foundation, which we are working very closely with, really in pursuance of that ideal of a better, prosperous, and a peaceful continent.
Now, the lecture will be delivered on a Saturday. What can we expect and who will be delivering this lecture?
Just before Saturday, we have actually set this program for the whole week. Today, we have been having a conversation about the use of the seas and the ocean as part of the economic revival of our continent. So we've been having this incredible conversation with the academics, with the experts, with the government officials in terms of looking at a comprehensive program of the ocean's economy. You will realize that 39 of the 54 countries in our continent are directly linked to the ocean. And if we didn't take serious this issue of the ocean, we will realize that even the colonial conquerors of our continent came through the sea, and the plundering of our continent's resources, it's the ports that are used to move all of these resources away from the continent. And I think it's time for us as a continent to have a conversation about how then we use this blue oceans economy, whether we're talking about sorting out the crisis of omega-3 and protein, whether we're sorting out the issues of trade, whether we're dealing with the issues of maritime security. So that's really what we were dealing with today. Tomorrow, we will do a kind of a preview of the lecture which is going to be taking place on Saturday, which is really to look at the state of our continent and this idea of reigniting the Renaissance movement. So that conversation is going to be taking place at the University of Dar es Salaam. And it's going to be a number of academics, the students and other young people, and eventually they will be having this conversation with President Mbeki, because really part of why we are moving around the continent is really to once again lift up this idea of the renaissance of our continent, in particular having these conversations with young people. Then on Friday, we will be having a conversation with South Africa and Tanzanian business community that will be hosted by Anglo Gold Asanda and ourselves, really to talk about the trade in between the two countries. We have seen in the past few months a terrible situation where Tanzania and South Africa were beginning to impose tariffs on one another. And we said that's very, very strange. And really something like that must not happen. We're actually supposed to do the exact opposite in terms of facilitating trade between these two countries. And I think those are some of the deep issues that we will be dealing with on Friday. Then on Saturday, that's the actual day of the lecture. Like you, I'm young to understand that Judge Warioba, who was the Prime Minister of Tanzania in 1985, and a really renowned figure in Tanzania, both as scholar, as a legal person, and as a politician, will be the one that will be delivering the lecture. But we decided that the way the lecture must be done, it's not to deliver a long thesis of an academic prose. It's for President Mbeki first to foreground the discussion about what he thinks is the state of the continent and what are the pain points that the continent must deal with. And Judge Warioba will be responding directly to some of the issues that President Mbeki will be raising. But Judge Warioba is 90 years, and he will take us through this journey of the Pan-African development, of the Pan-African trajectory as it developed in our continent. But then he will be joined by Generali Ulmengu and Professor Kabodi, who is now a Minister of Justice in Tanzania. They will then also look at these various epochs up until today and say, where is Africa today and where will it be tomorrow? So it's really going to be a festival of Pan-African thought and really the sort of gift we want to give to the East African people.
That was Chief Executive Officer at the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Max Botwana. He was speaking to Nhlanhla Mahlangu.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Well, we're going to get into our next hour of Africa Rise and Shine, starting off with the news by Onele Nzinzi. And of course, as I said, Peter's not with me today. And the reason is because he's at that Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture. Well, he's traveling there, not there yet in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. We'll be crossing to him tomorrow just to get more in terms of what's happening there. Nhlanhla Mahlangu, our correspondent as well here on Channel Africa, joining him. So lots to cover on that. It's still quite a number of days to go in terms of different conversations that will be taking place on the sidelines of that main lecture, which will be taking place on Saturday, the 24th of May in Tanzania. The theme being on the Julius Nyerere International Convention Center, the state of the continent. That will be that Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture.
Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.
Well, we enter the second hour of Africa Rise and Shine. It's 7 o'clock Central Africa time. Good morning to you. If you've just tuned in, well, we've got another 2 hours that you can stay with us and get informed about what's happening in Africa and around our continent. We're going to be looking in this hour at, we get a word actually from one of Tanzania's opposition leader Tundu Lissu's supporters and activist from Kenya, Martha Karua, about her deportation from the country. And South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch preparing to present the budget for the 2025-2026 financial year today. We'll be looking at that story as well. And of course, it's those two and more coming up on this hour of Africa Rise and Shine. My name is Asanda Beda. We're broadcasting live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa. We're on DSTV 802 on OpenView 628 and www.channelafrica.co.za. Here's Onele Nzinzi with that news headlines, the news bulletin rather, and then sports headlines with Musibudi Makura after her.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and the U.S. President Donald Trump will today meet in historic engagement since Trump returned to the White House in January. They are expected to discuss a number of issues, including trade, bilateral relations, and other pertinent matters between Pretoria and Washington. International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola and other ministers are also part of the visit. Lamola says President Ramaphosa is aware of the task ahead.
The President is acutely aware of that and is upbeat. He's ready. For us, it's about the reset of the strategic relationship between the two countries, which are very important. I mean, it's our second biggest trading partner. We are their number one trading partner in the continent. So there is a need for us to reset the relations.
Meanwhile, there's great anticipation ahead of the meeting between South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump today. Salt Blackies University students in Kimberley in the Northern Cape province say that it makes them proud that President Ramaphosa will set the record straight about what South Africa stands for. This is what the students had to say.
I think it's a good idea that they meet each other because I think personally they have very different views of what is happening in South Africa and especially what is happening that side. I think President Donald hasn't been here yet, so he doesn't know what it's like to be in South Africa.
I think it's a very great opportunity for this discussion to take place just because it's our country, we're proud of our country.
It is good that President Ramaphosa is going to set the record straight, but it would have been even better if he came to South Africa to have a better view of what he thinks South Africans actually love like and who they are.
The Department of Home Affairs in South Africa says the East London Magistrate Court released Pastor Timothy Omotoso had erred. He was arrested for contravening the Immigration Act and has since been deported. The department briefed Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs on the impact of litigation, as well as issues of state-funded legal representation of undocumented foreign nationals. Home Affairs Director General Tommy Makode explains.
There were two issues that we are of the view that the magistrate Kevin von Brandt misdirected himself. The first one is what Advocate Malakate stated, that the person has to appear within 48 hours, or as it states here, on the next day. And it specifically states on 2 that that period will be extended up to 4 p.m. of the first following court day. And we are of the view that that arrest was still within the confines in terms of the legislation. The second area, Chair, where we believe that the magistrate misdirected himself was with regards to indicating that Mr. Omotosho still had an opportunity to appeal to the DG.
Fighting has broken out between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces in the city of Omdurman across the River Nile from the capital Khartoum. The army says it's close to clearing the RSF from the whole of Khartoum state. This is more than 2 years after the civil war began. The BBC's Will Ross reports.
Omdurman has been the scene of heavy fighting throughout the 2-year war. Streets, homes, schools and shops are littered with ammunition and missiles, some of which are unexploded. The Sudanese army retook the capital in March and is still trying to secure all of Khartoum state. But that doesn't necessarily mean peace for the millions of civilians trying to rebuild their lives in the ruins. The Sudanese Air Force used to dominate the skies, but the paramilitary rapid support forces recently changed tactics and by using drones have been causing havoc in areas they don't control.
Lastly, the United Nations says no humanitarian aid has been distributed in Gaza despite the easing of Israel's 11-week blockade. Israel has given permission for about 100 more aid lorries to enter the territory. The BBC's Paddy McGee reports.
After a blockade lasting nearly 3 months, Gaza's population of 2 million people has been pushed to the brink of famine. But despite Israel announcing on Monday it would be allowing basic amounts of aid into the territory, food and medicines are still in desperately short supply. The UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric said that while the trucks had entered Gaza, they hadn't yet reached warehouses or delivery points and remained held at a loading dock. He said it was a complicated operation. The first supplies that arrived on Monday are also yet to be handed out.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, all system goes as Mamelodi Sundowns host Pyramids FC in the first leg of the CAF Champions League this weekend, while Kevin De Bruyne bids farewell to Manchester City at the Etihad. Details.
Your morning Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa will be meeting the U.S. President Donald Trump today. The two leaders are expected to dissect relations between their countries. South Africa's International Relations and Cooperation Minister, Ronald Lamola, has emphasized the importance of engaging with the United States on economic matters to foster a mutually beneficial relationship. In an interview with SABC, U.S. correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Peace, Lamola expressed his country's readiness to address any issues that may arise during their meeting.
In diplomacy, there is a role for state actors and non-state actors. The issue is how you navigate it, and that's why we are here, so that the diplomatic channels must continue to be the in-between of the two countries, that we must continue to negotiate an economic package between the two countries, which is mutually beneficial, a trade arrangement. Obviously, it will have to be navigated within the space of our constitutional architecture, our laws in the Republic of South Africa. So all those are issues that have to be taken into account, but not only domestically, also the Africa Free Trade Area, the fact that we are a member of SACU, and also the rules of the WTO.
My understanding also from discussing this issue with your colleagues is that this is a relationship, the US-South Africa bilateral relationship, that is not going to die on the Afrikaner white resettlement issue that is currently ongoing in the United States. In fact, South African officials have said we've dealt with that. It's not true. There is no genocide. We are now focusing on the future. How is that going to be navigated if it does in fact come up?
Yeah, obviously there is no evidence to back such. Our stats are there, evidence-based in terms of the police statistics. There is no law in South Africa that is specifically persecuting or targeting white Afrikaners. But there is a constitutional imperative that is there for transformation in the country, which is in the interest of the whole nation, for nation building. That is a constitutional imperative that is in the preamble, that is in the various laws of our country, which we have to ensure that we continue to pursue and to make sure that that imperative becomes a reality in terms of transformation. But it is not a specific targeting for persecution of white people. So we are looking forward to the engagement also. Obviously, there will be no holy cows. Whatever matter that will arise, as a Team South Africa, we are ready to deal with any matter.
That was South Africa's International Relations and Cooperation Minister, Ronald Lamola, speaking to SABC U.S. correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Peace ahead of President Cyril Ramaphosa's meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump today.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Protesters in Ghana have accused the country's president of violating the constitution and interfering in the independence of the judiciary. Eric Mawena Beda, the opposition protesters calling for the reinstatement of Tokonu.
The presidency and the president and all of its spokespersons around the seat of government have had one narrative and one narrative only, that no constitutional breaches have occurred in the process up until now, which has resulted in the suspension of the Chief Justice. In fact, it does appear the government has already communicated to these protesters that we're not interested in having the Chief Justice return and fill her position until the determination of the matter. We believe that she must remain suspended for the investigations to take place, after which the final determination will inform whether or not she returns.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
The state of democracy in East Africa. This is what we're discussing this morning with Martha Karua, a lawyer and a potential candidate for Kenya's 2027 presidential election. She has been vocal about how the authoritarian rule continues to thrive in East African countries with multiple systemic flaws in democracy. This week, she was deported from Tanzania. She was there to attend the trial of Tanzania's opposition presidential candidate, Tundu Lissu. Martha Karua has built her credentials over time as human rights defender, and she joins us now to discuss the politics and socio-economic matters that shape the democracies in East Africa. Martha, thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
I'm well, and thank you for having me.
We appreciate you making time for us. We speak to you a day after you and the group you were traveling with were stopped on arrival at Dar es Salaam airport and put on a flight back to Kenya. Firstly, can you tell us where you are now? Yesterday you were in Uganda, and what state are you in after this whole ordeal?
I'm well, and I'm in Uganda, waiting to go to court this morning in the case of Dr. Kizza Besigye and Obed Lutale. They are charged with treason, and you will remember their case was in the court-martial, and after a ruling in January this year by the Supreme Court of Uganda, the case was then registered afresh in the civilian court. As we are talking, yesterday Uganda's parliament passed a constitutional amendment allowing the trial of civilians in the court-martial, in the military courts. So it looks like we are going round and round. My deportation from Tanzania, nasty as it was, has not changed my resolve and the resolve of very many others who are determined to push back the clawback on democracy and civil liberties in East Africa, and the manner in which our leaders appear to be ganging up together to oppress the citizens. We have realized we need to stand in solidarity with one another, internally in our countries, across the region, and I dare say, across Africa.
Last year, Amnesty International's Dr. Tigere Chaguta raised concern over a decline in democracy in East Africa, which is something would seem that you guys share. He was citing multiple systemic flaws in the structure and practice of democracy. What about this particular case in Tanzania of opposition leader Tundu Lissu that made you want to offer your support and solidarity, as you say, in the first place?
Tundu Lissu is the main challenger to the incumbent president in Tanzania, Mama Samia Suluhu. All that Tundu Lissu has been incarcerated about is his call and his party's call for reforms before elections. And in a rally he addressed, he stated that no reforms, no elections. In other words, Chadema was not going to participate in elections if there were no reforms. That surely cannot amount to treason. A call to level the playing field. So his being taken to court, I see it as, on one hand, as the CCM and its candidate, President Samia Suluhu, trying to win the election by incarcerating the main opposition candidate, clamping down on the opposition. The last time we attended court, because 2 days ago would have been my second time, people were assaulted and prevented from accessing the court. That is, members of the public. And one person died as a result of the injuries. Many were injured, broken limbs, including officials of the Chadema party. And I do remember also the leader of ACT, Wazalendo Dorothy Semu. I saw pictures of her being pushed away very roughly by the police. The law in Tanzania, like in most of our countries, is that in a criminal case, an accused must be subjected to a fair and impartial trial that should be public. So as members of public, as citizens of East Africa, we were there to observe a public trial. We were deported, denied entry, not given any reasons whatsoever, which is in violation not only of Tanzanians' constitution and laws, but violation of the East African Treaty and international laws. And I believe SADC may also be having traditions like, or procedures like the East Africa Cooperation. Tanzania is a member of both SADC and the EAC. So it's a violation of many international norms, including the AU Charter on Human and People's Rights.
Well, on the side of Tanzania, reports in the media were that the reasons were they were having security concerns in terms of why you were barred from attending court proceedings. Yet we saw from some even footage on X, the social media platform of Lisu's court appearance, there was a heavy police presence. So that would indicate some type of a capacity for law enforcement and maybe even future planning or pre-planning, if we look at it in that sense. Can you understand this reasoning as that they had security concerns, given that there was so much law enforcement? And is it valid in your view?
That is pure intimidation. Recalling that the first time they never even allowed public to access the court premises. Remembering that they also had prevented Tundu Lissu from coming to court, forcing him to observe the proceedings virtually, which he completely refused. The court also refused the plea by his lawyers that he should appear physically. The change of heart to allow him to appear physically, I believe, was as a result of pressure, including the pressure of observers. I want you to know that even though they barred 6 of us from Kenya from entering Tanzania, several of our comrades had already entered, were able to appear in court, and in court, you can see from the footage, there were many diplomats, Western diplomats, as observers. And the question I pose to the CCM and its leadership, how is it different for an East African like myself to observe? How is it different from the observation by foreign diplomats? How come you appreciate foreign diplomats observing the trial, but you do not want citizens of the Jumuiya to which you subscribe to observe? We also do think that there was complicit, the government of Kenya was complicit in how we were treated. Yesterday, I heard the Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs claiming that it was okay for Tanzania to do what they did to us. In other words, the government of Kenya is defending the actions of Tanzania, mistreating their citizens, than standing up. So obviously there is collaboration between these two governments in oppressing the citizens, their own citizens, and in preventing the rule of law to prevail in East Africa.
Let's talk Uganda's controversial People's Defence Forces Amendment Bill of 2025. This was passed yesterday. It will essentially see civilians tried in the courts martial. It's obviously been highly opposed. It's controversial, as we say. What will this mean for fair trial for those who are like opposition leader Kizza Besigye, who you also are wanting to support and see?
Well, it means aimed at defeating the Supreme Court judgment of the 31st of January this year, which declared, rightly so, that trial of civilians in the military court was unconstitutional. As of that time, the Constitution did not give UPDF any mandate over civilians. This amendment to give UPDF mandate over civilians not only undermines the civilian courts and the rule of law and justice, but it's also in direct contradiction with the court ruling and therefore is aimed at defeating the court ruling, which is again outlawed by the Ugandan constitution. What we are seeing is totally unusual. You cannot amend the constitution just merely to pursue your opponents. And Dr. Kizza Besigye in Uganda is one of the leading opposition candidates. There's also Bobby Wine or Changulani, Robert Changulani, whose party is the largest opposition party. And we have seen how his party is being persecuted and the members being abducted, tortured, released, threatened.
And just briefly on that point, because we're running out of time now, as you mentioned those different leaders, you've been vocal in the media about your activism for particularly this region of East Africa, as you call for the solidarity between the states in the region. Cases in point is what you make now, Uganda's Bobi Wine, Kenya's unreasonable detainings and arrests, Chad's Sukse Masra, and of course Tanzania's Tundu Lissu. How do you see this and your calls for fairness and politics, your activism for East African solidarity affecting your own possible campaign for Kenya's 2027 presidential elections as a potential candidate under your People's Liberation Party?
I see this clampdown as a deliberate attempt by the leaders of the countries we have named within East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. As we draw towards the election cycle, in Tanzania, October this year, they will be electing, it will be presidential elections. In Uganda, it's January next year. In Kenya, it's August 2027. This clampdown is to disable the opposition from effectively participating. It is our duty, our civic duty as citizens of the respective countries and of East Africa to push back against this clawback on civil liberties.
All right.
And we are doing that in Kenya. We are doing that through the court, through calls, and also through unity of purpose as the opposition. I'm calling upon the opposition in the respective countries to come together in order not only to push back, but to have a fair chance of competing against this emerging authoritarian rule.
Martha, thank you so much again. We appreciate your time and for joining us here on Africa Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Thank you and good day.
You too. Martha Karua, a lawyer and potential candidate for Kenya's 2027 presidential elections, talking to us about the state of democracy in East Africa, of course, zooming into Tanzania.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Equality Now is urging the African Commission on Human and People's Rights to call upon African Union or AU member states to urgently address rising sexual violence and exploitation of women and girls across the continent. In its statement to the 83rd Ordinary Session of the Commission this month, the International Human Rights Organization called on the Commission to use its mandate to underscore the importance to governments about the need to provide reparations for survivors of sexual violence, criminalize femicide, boost efforts to end child marriage, and strengthen laws to stop digital violence. Let's talk about this as we're being joined on the line now by Evans Munga, a gender expert with Equality Now's End Sexual Exploitation or Africa team. Thank you so much for joining us, Evans. How are you?
Very good. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Please give us background on your statement to the 83rd Ordinary Session of the Commission this month and your call on the Commission in terms of how it should use its mandate.
Thank you so much for helping us amplify this statement and call from Equality Now to the, of course, African Commission on Human and People's Rights on the 83rd session that was held this month. Now, we are witnessing, first I must say, why is this submission important to us? And why? What is this? Why is it important to us? Of course, Equality Now is calling on the African Commission on People's Rights to push the African member states to urgently address rising levels of sexual violence, exploitation of women and girls across the continent. And of course, we have seen reports across countries in Africa, of course, ranging number of cases of femicide, cases of sexual violence, cases of mediate brutal violence through, of course, the conflicts, be it in South Sudan, be it in DRC, and women and girls bear the brutal consequence of such kind of issues. And we're asking the member states, of course, to urgently ask those states to address those levels of violence. that are made to women and girls in the continent. And of course, we are witnessing alarming trends in many countries, and this has increased over time, ranging from online exploitation and of course to seeing some failed weak laws, and of course systems not really supporting those kind of exploitation, and of course it's now harmful to women and girls. And of course, why are we talking about this? We are asking and urging member states through the Commission to urge that strong legal protection to ensure, of course, proper implementation of laws, if at all, and of course, end impunity, of course, for perpetrators. Justice system must be accessible, and of course, we need to have survivor-centered approaches. Invest in prevention and survivor services, and of course, tackle digital sexual exploitations. And of course, we are looking at the Commission to ensure that member states comply to the Niamey guidelines that was adopted in 2017 in Ijao.
In what ways do you propose that there be reparations for survivors of sexual violence, considering the complexities in mental, psychological and physical effects on survivors that this type of violence leaves behind? Where should we even begin when we say reparations?
It's very important to look at it in context of a country, and each country have their own set of laws, have their own set of how they engage, ranging from how they handle survivors of sexual exploitations. What are the mechanisms? What are the guidelines? And of course, to adopt that, that's where we're mentioning the Niamey guidelines that support how to handle victims of sexual exploitations. We also have the emergence of online exploitations, and countries are urged through the Commission to ensure that they have proper guidelines, preventive laws that stop some of these online and harmful practices that are, of course, trickling into the online spaces.
And let's unpack digital violence. In what ways does it manifest, and who's most vulnerable to it?
Of course, we have seen, the digital violence. It's manifested through the online space if it's not well regulated, and we have seen perpetrators using these online channels to lure girls, to lure women. And of course, because of other push factors, poverty included, and then they find themselves in the hands of their own people. And of course, that's what we call sex trafficking. People are exploited because of their vulnerability. Poverty is one of them, lack of information, lack of awareness, lack of proper laws that govern these online spaces. And those who bear the brutal and the consequences of denial of this is girls and women. And of course, how do we cap this? And of course, we need also to work with the online operators, the digital operatives and digital industries, telecommunication agencies, civil societies, governments, to ensure that they look critically, of course, looking at the context. Countries are of different contexts. What are the rates in terms of usage? What are some of the apps that are used? How do we have guidelines? Do we have laws that are complementing to ensure that then we are tapping this kind of menace that is crippling the rights and the welfare of girls and women when they are engaging online? And of course, to support the welfare and the needs of these people. Because when you are talking about poverty as a push factor, then how does a country or a state ensure that people are well protected through other safeguards to ensure that their welfare is covered, so that they are not met with this when they are trying to make a living through the online spaces, and then the perpetrators use that as a means to lure them.
Evans, this is an ongoing conversation. I imagine we'll catch up again, especially on this particular report, because there's still so many points to touch on, but we are completely out of time. So for today, we'll leave it there. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Evans Munga is gender expert with Equality Now's End Sexual Exploitation Africa team, and the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights calling upon African Union member states to urgently address rising sexual Violence and exploitation is what our topic was today. 31 minutes past 7 Central African time. Let's get our news headlines from Onel Nsinzi, followed by Musibudi Makura with our sports update.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and the US President Donald Trump will today meet in a historic engagement since Trump returned to the White House in January. They are expected to discuss a number of issues, including trade, bilateral relations, and other pertinent matters between Pretoria and Washington. The International Committee of the Red Cross in Southern Africa says that there are 23 active conflicts in Africa, some involving tribal and ethnic differences. The ICRC says it is concerned that recently women and children are killed and raped in the countries undergoing conflict. And the United Nations says no humanitarian aid has been distributed in Gaza, despite the easing of Israel's 11-week blockade. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And a very good morning from the sports desk. We'll start here. So Kevin De Bruyne received an emotional farewell at the Etihad Stadium for the final time on Tuesday night. And the moment even brought manager Pep Guardiola to tears, who called it a sad day. The 33-year-old will go down as Manchester City legend and also proclaimed he will always be here after the announcement that a statue will be built in his honour outside of the stadium. Captain De Bruyne is set to depart at the end of the season and started his last home game in City's 3-1 victory over Bournemouth. But the Premier League great bowed out in somewhat of an abject manner. He had the chance to go out in style but missed a first-half sitter and was then sacrificed in the second half after Mateo Kovacic sending off, a sad ending to such an illustrious career. Let's hear from the manager, Guardiola, calling it a sad day to have Kevin De Bruyne leaving the club.
They are connected, the people from Man City with him, his family, and how much love. That is nice, everything we achieve. But when you live in a place like we have been a decade with this incredible much of love and respect and gratitude, there is nothing else better than that. So I'm part of that. Of course, the club will take the decision. I'm part of that, and it's a sad day, so we'll be missed. So there is no doubt about that. And
back home now, after years of building, recalibrating, as well as coming agonizingly close, Mamelodi Sundowns may finally be on the cusp of reclaiming their place at the summit of African football. Now, the Brazilians are on the verge of lifting their first ever Total Energies CAF Champions League title since 2016, and the evidence supporting their claim is more compelling than ever. So the final is a two-legged affair, with the first set for the 24th of May, this coming Saturday at Loftus Versfeld, and the country's capital city, Pretoria, and the decisive return leg taking place on the 1st of June at the Cairo International Stadium in Egypt, where Pyramids will be hosting that game. Having already conquered the South African domestic scene with an unprecedented 8th consecutive league title, Sundowns have shifted all focus now to bringing home the biggest prize in African club football. Meanwhile, following a 2-0 win for RS Bakan over Simba SC in the first leg of the 2024-2025 Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup final in Bakan, Morocco, attention now will turn to the return fixture on the island of Zanzibar this coming Sunday. The match will be played at Amman Stadium. RS Bakan go into the second leg with an advantage after early goals from Mamadou Kamara as well as Osama Lemloi at home, but Simba SC have shown plenty of fighting spirit already this campaign and will be confident on overturning the deficit. Now, the winners of this year's Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup will also be awarded a new trophy that will be unveiled later on in the week. In tennis news now, Carlos Alcaraz arrives at Roland Garros brimming with confidence after taking down chief rival Jannik Sinner in Rome, but the defending champion expects the Italian to be an even tougher proposition after shaking off the rust following his doping ban. Alcaraz as well as Sinner will be on opposite sides of the draw as the Spaniard returned to the second Grand Slam of the year. Following the doping scandal, and of course returning to second in the world rankings following his Italian triumph, potentially also setting up a stage for another blockbuster final between the game's two rising superstars. The 22-year-old Alcaraz has won 15 of the 16 matches on clay this season, triumphing at Monte Carlo as well as reaching the Barcelona final before going all the way in Rome after missing the Madrid Open with a thigh injury. Now, four-time Grand Slam champion Alcaraz believes the challenge of playing Sinner brings the best out of him. Meanwhile, Novak Djokovic says he couldn't get more out of his partnership with Andy Murray, but is in no rush to find a new coach. The Serbian, who turns 38 on Thursday, parted company with former rival Murray earlier on in May after 6 months of working together. Djokovic has taken a wild card into the Geneva Open, one of the final tournaments before the French Open, as he looks to find more rhythm on the court. The French Open starts this coming Sunday, with Djokovic seeking a standalone record 25th Grand Slam title. Djokovic also has yet to win a match on clay this year, having suffered early exits in Monte Carlo as well as Madrid before skipping the recently concluded Italian Open. Now, lifting the title in Geneva would make Djokovic just the third man in the Open era to win the 100 ATP singles title, as well as to welcome, it will be a welcome boost for the former world number one before the second Grand Slam tournament of the year. Djokovic is joined in Geneva by Dusan Vimic, who was previously part of his team, and the assistant coach and analyst Boris Bonslakovic. It's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibu D. Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
My name is Neto, NETO Chamani. Osiatiko, Nengezimo, Mkanju, Pantla Kunjani, Moyani, Voko Tendele. Africa at Play, Asteleli Siashaya. Africa's velvet voice is in the house. Africa at Play is a place to be, where we speak all things sport and music, from the African continent to the rest of the world. We speak to your bundles of joy in sport, 12-year-olds and below, teenagers in sport. And we speak to elite athletes, administrators, coaches, and all the behind-the-scenes stakeholders of sport and music. Africa at Play, Asteleli Siashaya. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
Let's get the latest from the world of business. Here's Buntle Headbush with our details.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says high on the agenda when he meets U.S. President Donald Trump today will be trade relations. Trump imposed high tariffs to several countries, including South Africa, when he returned to office. The president says Pretoria wants to increase trade with Washington.
Trade relations are the most important. That's what has brought us here. We want to come out of the United States with a really good trade deal, investment promotion. We invest in the United States and they invest in us, and we want to strengthen those relations, and we want to consolidate good relations between our two countries.
Analysts expect that South Africa's national budget will be passed following the significant consultation amongst parties within the Government of National Unity. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will today make his third attempt at tabling the budget following a standoff over a VAT hike which National Treasury has since withdrawn. Chief Economist at Investec, Annabelle Bishop, says while the budget seeks to raise revenue, government may also be looking to cut down spending and limiting borrowing.
Looking forwards, South Africa is not expected to see significant tax increases either. Instead, the budget is likely to see most of the revenue needed raised from failure to give relief for bracket creep when people's salaries rise due to inflation-adjusted increases. Then, of course, if the individual does not see relief in terms of going into a higher bracket, they're due to end up being taxed more. Also on the cards potentially is a lift in the fuel levy, and these factors in the main, along with expenditure cuts, should provide a balanced budget.
China's CMOC Group, the world's top cobalt mining company, has called on the Democratic Republic of Congo to lift a ban on exports of the battery metal, which is currently due to expire next month. Congo is the world's leading cobalt producing country, and it imposed the 4-month ban in February in an attempt to curb surpluses on cobalt prices, which touched 9-year lows around $10 a pound or $22,000 a metric ton. Congo has kept the market guessing on its next steps when the ban ends on the 22nd of June. Sources say the government could extend the suspension and could also look at export quotas for the future. Ethiopia has announced a comprehensive macroeconomic reform program to achieve sustainable economic growth and stability. The program includes measures to address foreign exchange distortions, balance of payment deficits, and inflation. Key elements include transitioning to a market-based exchange rate, modernizing monetary policy, and strengthening the financial sector. Founder and CEO of Pragma Investment Advisory, Merit Fikire Johannes.
The most anticipated one, and this has been cried by the market in terms of, which has been distorting the Ethiopia's forex price and also exacerbating the price between the parallel market and the official market. Is right now the official market is standing around 130 birr. The parallel market is currently standing around 150 birr for a dollar.
The European Union is planning to introduce a €2 flat fee on billions of small customs-free parcels sent directly to people's homes from China, including those from the online retailers Shein and Temu. Some of the revenues would cover the costs of the customs checks required by the growing volume of imports spurred by low-cost retailers, while the remaining money would go to the EU budget. The BBC's Kezia Salah has the details.
Almost 5 billion small parcels were sent to the EU last year, most of them from China. None of them had to pay customs duties. This might change soon. EU officials claim many of these items are unsafe or fake and don't compete fairly with local products. They say the sheer volume of these parcels has created a huge workload for border control staff. The revenue from the new €2 levy would help tackle the issue.
Now for a look at our financial indicators this morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,600 naira 79. In Botswana, 13 pula 39. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 49. And in Zambia, it's 27 kwacha 5. Moving on to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 65. In Russia, 80 rubles 54. India, 85 rupees 51. And in China, it's at 7 yuan 21. South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 99 cents. A bit stronger this morning. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Looking at commodities this morning, gold is trading at $3,301 and platinum at $1,047 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $66.37 a barrel. And those are your business news at this hour. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Bontle Hedbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
7:45 Central African time it is here on Rise and Shine. Good morning. If you've just joined us, thanks to Buntle there with our economics update. Analysts expect that South Africa's national budget will be passed following significant consultation among parties within the government of national unity. This as Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana prepares to make his third attempt at tabling the national budget this afternoon in Cape Town, a standoff over a VAT hike, which National Treasury has since withdrawn. A lower economic growth projection below the National Treasury's previous 1.9% forecast for this year is also anticipated. Economics reporter Naledi Ngobo reports.
Analysts expect a reform-driven national budget announcement that aims to prioritize long-term economic growth. Chief economist at Investec, Annabelle Bishop, says while the budget seeks to raise revenue, government may also be looking to cut spending and limit borrowing.
Looking forwards, South Africa is not expected to see significant tax increases either. Instead, the budget is likely to see most of the revenue needed raised from failure to give relief for bracket creep when people's salaries rise due to inflation-adjusted increases. Then, of course, if the individual does not see relief in terms of going into a higher bracket, they do end up being taxed more. Also on the cards potentially is a lift in the fuel levy, and these factors in the main, along with expenditure cuts, should provide a balanced budget. Going forward, government needs to focus on fiscal consolidation.
An analyst at ETM Analytics, Laura Campbell, says consensus among members of the National Government of Unity signals a move away from increased spending and taxes, which will ultimately benefit consumers and reduce the national debt.
We had the DA leader praising Finance Minister Godongwana for providing insight into the collaborative work of putting this budget together. This is a positive signal. Investors will be relieved, and this could in turn contribute to the rand's resilience. But nonetheless, the budget is unlikely to be the silver bullet in transforming the economy, given the need for compromise amongst parties and South Africa's fiscally precarious position. But overall, we're expecting a much more reform-driven budget for the benefit of longer-term economic growth.
Analysts say strengthening SARS tax collection capacity may help to boost revenue without raising any new taxes. I'm Naledi Ngobo in Johannesburg.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Well, let's continue then on that point or topic as South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana prepares to present the budget for the 2025-2026 financial year today. He finds himself balancing on a tightrope amid mounting public pressure. This is as some want the South African Revenue Service to be properly funded to collect more tax, while others persist that Godongwana should introduce wealth tax and draw down from the gold and foreign exchange contingency reserve account. For more on what we can expect from today's budget speech, we're joined on the line by Professor Yanni Rousseau, visiting professor at the Wits Business School. Professor Rousseau, thank you for joining us. How are you this Wednesday?
Good morning. Good morning to the listeners. It is a cold Wednesday. I'm fine, but a very busy Wednesday with the budget, with Mr. Trump visiting Mr. Ramaphosa in Washington. So a very busy media day.
Absolutely. So it will be the third time Godongwana tables the budget today after he postponed the initial presentation set for February following warnings from the DA to withdraw its support. What do you make of the incidents and whatever has happened with this entire budget process up to now?
The entire budget process is not something that the government of national unity should at all be proud of. We have this unfortunate situation that all the political parties now claim credit for the VAT increase not going through. I'd rather want to see the political parties stop trying to claim credit and to give us plans for more rapid economic growth so that the tax base can grow and so that the unemployment problem can get under control. So our political parties are focusing in the wrong space.
What are some of the most urgent needs that the budget must address now that the VAT issue seems to be behind us?
Well, on the one hand, we need higher economic growth, as I've said. On the other hand, there will now be less revenue, and the budget will have to explain to us how that gap will be filled. Will it be through other tax increases, which I'm not in favor of? Will it be through larger borrowing that I'm not in favor of? Will it be through cutting unnecessary expenditure, which I'm all for? I'm in favor of cutting all the unnecessary expenditure from the fiscus.
What are likely to be implications on the scrapping of those plans to increase VAT, if we can go back there?
Well, the implication, as I've said, less revenue to the fiscus. The positive side, of course, we must always remember that higher VAT will lead to higher inflation. So the inflation pressure from higher VAT has been removed. The one thing that nobody is focused on is, of course, the huge cost to South African businesses for preparing for a VAT increase that never went through. My own calculations show that the cost to South African businesses for the VAT increase was more than R1 billion, which is now wasted expenditure. And at the minimum, I want the Minister to apologize to South African businesses for this wasteful expenditure. There is no recognition from the government side that bad planning results in costs to South African businesses that makes it more complicated and more difficult to operate in the South African business environment.
And as we speak on bad planning, we've recently been speaking about the South African Revenue Services, or SARS, wanting to intensify its drive to clamp down on tax defaulters. Can we see this as a panic response to that bad planning, to some of the implications of scrapping VAT increase plans?
I would not see SARS taking steps to get everybody to pay their fair shares as a panic response. I would think of that as fair collection practices. We should all pay our fair share, but then SARS should also be fair in its approach towards businesses and not try and get revenue where businesses and individuals are not liable to pay such expenses. So yes, I'm all in favor of taking steps to collect tax, but SARS must be fair in its approach towards taxpayers in such a drive.
Some are urging Kotongwana to introduce the wealth tax and draw down from the gold and foreign exchange contingency reserve account. Would that help stabilize things, in your view?
Oh, we already have a wealth tax in the form of a capital gains tax. We have a wealth tax in the form of dividend withholding tax. My concern is that more wealth taxes will result in larger immigration of wealthy South Africans. I know that the socialists don't agree with me, but the evidence shows that South African millionaires are indeed immigrating. As far as the gold and foreign exchange contingency reserve is concerned, the government can draw down from that, but we have to remember that that surplus can be wiped out, can move into a deficit, especially with the rand appreciating against other currencies. That will result in a loss on that account. And if there's ever a loss on that account, taxpayers will have to make that good. It will be money that must then be paid to the Reserve Bank. So it's not as if this account is a piggy bank in which the government can, from which the government can take money as and when it wants. It must, the government must remember that there can also be an obligation to settle a balance on that account, as has happened before.
So government needs to come up with expenditure cuts, and that's something that you also would be in support of, as you say. But will that have the least damage on growth or service delivery? And would that be possible in our difficult economic climate?
Yes, indeed. The government can get rid of 43 deputy ministers, will save us a fortune. I really don't know what deputy ministers do. They can't even deputize for the minister. So just get rid of the deputy ministers. We don't need them. Get rid of some government departments that add very little value. For instance, the Department of Small Business Development, I've never understood what they do because they don't develop small businesses. As far as I can see, small businesses work very hard to be successful. Likewise, in education departments, get rid of huge bureaucracies in departmental education departments. They have huge bureaucracies there. Rather send those people to schools to start teaching. That's where you need resources. So we also need to rethink how some of these departments operate to get better efficiency.
If we look at the examples of other budget speeches recently held in the continent, looking at Malawi in February and their challenge of a double-digit inflation, which was a concern, and the finance minister there, Simplex Chitiola, cutting the economic growth forecast. Can we see parallels with South Africa on that point? And then also in Nigeria, where they have concerns of the high cost of living, and their budget speech was in March, a majority of Nigerians being employed in the informal sector, about 93% of them. Is that the direction that South Africa could be going to, where we have low income and vulnerable jobs on the one hand, and also that we could see our minister cutting our economic growth forecast in this speech?
Yeah, I already expect a lower economic growth forecast than what we saw in the first attempt to budget in February, because the growth expectations are lower than what it was in February. At the same time, talking about an inflation problem, I would want to see the minister announcing a lower inflation target for South Africa. We've had our current inflation target for nearly 25 years. In my view, South Africa is now ready for a lower inflation target of 3% per annum, with a range of 1 percentage point on each side of it. So I hope that the minister will announce such a lower inflation target today.
What should the minister announce in terms of his roadmap for foreign direct investment?
Well, the minister should announce steps that South Africa will take to make it easier and more attractive for foreigners to invest in South Africa rather than in other countries. For one, if we raise company tax, it will make it less attractive for foreigners and foreign companies to invest in South Africa. Secondly, the minister will have to think carefully about initiatives to keep foreign investors here. I've already read rumors that Nissan, the Japanese motor manufacturer, might close its manufacturing facility in Rossland, which will be a severe blow to the local economy in Rossland. So the minister should also start thinking about plans to make it more attractive for foreign investors who are already invested in South Africa to stay in the country.
All right. Well, let's leave it there for today. Thanks again for your time, Professor. We appreciate it, and I hope you stay warm. That cold front they warned us for in Johannesburg is definitely setting in.
Thank you, and send good wishes to stay warm to you and the listeners.
All right. Professor Yanni Rousseau is visiting professor at the Wits Business School here in Johannesburg, talking of a forecast in terms of our finance minister, Godongwana, who is going to be making his budget speech today for 2025-2026 financial year. Well, as we enter into the next hour of Africa Rise and Shine, that will be the third actually. I don't know how time flies so quickly. I thought it's only the second hour, but it's the third and final hour of Africa Rise and Shine. So if you've just joined us, thank you so much for doing just that. Remember, you can find us on social media. Our handles are at Channel Africa 1, and that's on X, on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube. We're also on Facebook as Channel Africa. And we are live streaming over and above being on DSTV 802, on OpenView 628, as well as www.channelafrica.co.za. My name is Asanda Beda. Lots to cover in this coming hour. We've got our Wednesday profile looking at some of the Africans that are making us proud and I guess raising the African flag high. We need one. We need a unified flag. So anyway, we'll get into that story and I'll tell you who we're talking to today in a bit. First of all, let's get our news headlines in this hour. News bulletin rather, with Onele Nzinzi, and then sports headlines with Musibudi Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and US President Donald Trump will today meet in a historic engagement since Trump returned to the White House in January. They are expected to discuss a number of issues, including trade, bilateral relations, and other pertinent matters between Pretoria and Washington. The International Relations Minister, Ronald Lamola, and other ministers are also part of the visit. Lamola says President Ramaphosa is aware of the task ahead.
The President is acutely aware of that and is upbeat, he's ready. For us, it's about the reset of the strategic relationship between the two countries, which are very important. I mean, it's our second biggest trading partner. We are their number one trading partner in the continent. So there is a need for us to reset the relations.
A former Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo has been sentenced to a decade's forced labor for corruption. Augustine Matata Ponyo was found guilty of embezzling over $240 million of public funds by the Congolese Constitutional Court on Tuesday, alongside the former governor of the DR Congo Central Bank, Geogracius Mutombo. Matata served as Prime Minister of the DRC from 2012 to 2016 and now heads the country's Leadership and Governance for Development Party. His lawyer said the ruling was unfair and politically motivated. The International Committee of the Red Cross in Southern Africa says there are 23 active conflicts in Africa, some involving tribal and ethnic differences. The humanitarian aid organization says it is concerned that recently women and children are killed and raped in countries undergoing conflict. In a groundbreaking effort to spotlight the root of international humanitarian law in African traditions, the ICRC Pretoria Regional Delegation launched an initiative called the Tool on African Traditions and the Preservation of Humanity in Warfare to explore the continent's historical relationship with the law of armed conflict through local practices and values. ICRC's regional legal advisor, Sarah Mabiza, explains.
So while African states certainly believe in international humanitarian law and comply with it, there's certainly room to enhance the ownership of African states over this body of law. So while this research looks at African traditions, beliefs and practices and values, we've also, as the ICRC, been involved in work to build bridges between religion and international humanitarian law. This research and this tool does not exist in isolation, but really it's something that we in the Pretoria delegation are incredibly proud of.
The Department of Home Affairs in South Africa says the East London Magistrate Court, who released Pastor Timothy Omotoso, had erred. He was arrested for contravening the Immigration Act and has since been deported. The department briefed Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs on the impact of litigation, as well as issues of state-funded legal representation of undocumented foreign nationals. Home Affairs Director General Tommy Makode elaborates.
There were two issues that we are of the view that the magistrate Kevin von Brand misdirected himself. The first one is what Advocate Malakate stated, that the person is to appear within 48 hours, or as it states here, on the next day. And it specifically states on 2 that that period will be extended up to 4 p.m. of the first following court date. And we are of the view that that arrest was still within the confines in terms of the legislation. The second area, Chair, where we believe that the magistrate misdirected himself was with regards to indicating that Mr. Omotosho still had an opportunity to appeal to the DG.
Lastly, the UN says it has received permission from Israel for a further 100 aid trucks to enter Gaza yesterday. It is, however, said that the first supplies to enter the enclave in more than 11 weeks, which arrived on Monday, have yet to be distributed. The BBC's Wyatt Davis.
This is Kerem Shalom, the southernmost border crossing between Gaza and Israel. I've seen only a handful of trucks coming down here today. Others have gone in. Most of them contain that basic food aid. They were large sacks of flour stamped with the logo of the World Food Programme. Both the United Nations and the Israeli government intimate that about 100 trucks might get across today, but it's nowhere near the 600 trucks daily that the UN says are needed. There are 2.1 million people in desperate need of food and other basic aid.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Mamelodi Sundowns fully focused ahead of the first leg of the CAF Champions League final against Pyramids FC. And Kevin De Bruyne bids farewell to Manchester City at the ATR. Details coming up at 8:30.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. 5 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle. We deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every
It is a Wednesday, and here on Rise and Shine, we dedicate this day to shining the spotlight on Africans doing amazing things and shaping the continent's future. So this morning, we shine the spotlight on Kenyan Senator, 34-year-old, nominated for the 4th Senate in the 13th Parliament of Kenya to represent persons with disabilities and special interest groups. Her name is Senator Crystal Asige, who's also an award-winning musician, diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, disability rights advocate, inclusive mobility and transport practitioner, accessibility auditor, and a public speaker. Her followers know her as VIP, or visually impaired persons. She joins us on the line to tell us more now about who she is and where she's going. Senator Crystal Asige, welcome to Africa Rise and Shine. How are you?
Well, Asanda, how are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. So this song we're playing in the background, I think let's start there. Tell us more about it. I understand it was quite well received on its release.
Yes, it was. It's I did it in collaboration with our Ministry for Sports, because at the time, just a few months prior to my releasing the song, there were GBV issues within the sports sector. We had unfortunately lost one of our rising stars in athletics. Her name was Agnes Tirop, and she unfortunately was killed by her partner. And so Ministry of Sports had to delve into this issue of GBV within sports and how women are taken advantage of when they are trying to fly our flag high in the international stage. And so they called upon me to try and write a song to accompany that particular campaign, and that was it. And it's just about women having to work twice as hard to get half as far, and even more so women with disabilities, because that is who I am and what I represent.
Absolutely. You wear many, many hats, and I want to know how you fuse them together, if you even do fuse them together, or if you have to be multiple people all at the same time, and especially how music connects to politics for you. But let's go back in terms of how you even started to sing. You speak of a time when you were younger, and you used to sing to your mother in a way of expressing yourself better. For some reason, words didn't come as easily as they did in form of music for you. You would sing to your mom to tell her about how your day was coming back from school, if she asked. And you were dealing with some bullying, I think, at the time. So you were able to express yourself with music. Tell us more.
preparatory school, I used to come home and instead of telling her, like you say, about the bullies, I would sing what happened in school about the bullies. And that's when she realized, oh, Crystal has a knack of expressing herself, but through music, through song. And that moved into me writing poetry when I was about 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. And getting very much into public and performing arts in school, theater, anything I could do on stage, I would really enjoy it because I would find it easier to express myself when I was on stage and almost in another character. So that's how it started. And when I was in university in the UK, I realized that people actually got paid for singing. That was the first time I ever went to like an open mic night, and I didn't know what that was about because it was the first time I ever left Kenya. So when I saw people actually making a few coins, and people would appreciate you by giving you a few pounds, a few coins when you're singing at an open mic night, I thought, that's interesting. Perhaps I should consider doing this as a career when I finish university and I go back home, which is what I did. And funnily enough, nowadays with my politics, music, as well as politics, as well as public speaking and acting and theater, which is what I studied in university, all roll up into this beautiful ball of uniqueness as a legislator and as a politician that I seem to be a unicorn in parliament because I can express myself not just by getting on a mic and speaking to the people, but also writing and singing to the people.
So your music is described as Afropop, but let's talk about in terms of your subject matter. What would you say you touch on the most when it comes to your music?
I would say that, well, people give me the feedback that my music is very inspirational, it's very motivational, because I like to, speak about good times and enjoyment, but more so about how to turn your perspective around whatever the situation. So I always try to have a message or a narrative in my music of, hey, if you can change a circumstance, then yes, absolutely change it. But if you cannot change a circumstance, whatever that might be, then change how you look at your circumstance, because mindset and perspective really is the gateway from moving from sinking to swimming in whatever challenge you have.
Then in varsity, you study film and theater. One would have thought maybe you were an economist or a sociologist or even a psychologist, or you studied under the humanities or social sciences, but you did film and theater. And you're also the fourth born child at home. And I know sometimes they say after the third child, the kids in the family start feeling like they're not being heard, the forgotten ones. Was that why you wanted to have a creative expression in varsity? As you were born in Mombasa, Kenya, as a fourth child, wanting to do film and theater?
I think actually, I would say that is exactly it, because, as the last born, you have to really fight for everything, whether it's, the last piece of chicken on the table, or whether it's to be heard and seen and understood in family meetings. The last born is always like, oh, okay, you just sit there and listen to the rest of us speak.
Yeah.
So I think that was absolutely an outlet
and for the road trips, you're the forgotten one. They see after they've traveled about 2 kilometers that you're not in the car.
Exactly, precisely. So yes, this was my opportunity to get on a stage and embody a character outside of who I am, to be able to speak the thoughts that I am actually thinking, and to say what I really want to say.
And then you went into music with the film and theater. So that transition, tell us about that.
Yeah, from the film and theater, as I said, I saw a lot in the UK when I was studying in Bristol, and that is a very creative city. Very many creative people go to Bristol, actually, which is in the west of England. And from that experience, that exposure, when I came back home, and I struggled to find work, Asanda. I tried to look for media jobs. I went to media houses saying, hey, I've worked, because when I was in university, I also worked at BBC just after I finished. So I was like, I have this experience with BBC. I think I can do the job. So can you give me some work? But many media houses in Kenya looked at my visual impairment and they thought, are you sure you can get into TV? Are you sure you can? Nah, we don't think you can. So I was rejected a lot. So when I went back home to Mombasa, and I was sort of like recalibrating and trying to figure out how will I now live with my disability and find work, I thought, I don't want to be employed, because I keep getting rejected every door I walk into. I want to employ myself. And that's when I had to, put the battery or fire the battery in my own back and say, let me try and infuse my music, my theater and film degree, as well as my passion for disability rights and human rights in general, and what would that come up with? And so the first thing I did was open a YouTube channel, and I called it Blind Girl Manenos. Maneno is a Swahili word which just means like stuff or things. So blind girl things, from how I cook now as a blind person to how I clean, how I iron, how I go shopping. I just wanted people to understand my new, in quotes, life, because when I left, before I left for varsity, I had my eyesight. When I came back from varsity, I had lost my eyesight. So people were really wondering, how do you live now? So I infused all of my different skills and talents into this vlog on YouTube, and then, of course, into music as well.
And let's talk about that, the fact that you were not born with an eye or seeing impairment. When you were told that you have glaucoma as a teenager, which led to the loss of your eyesight, first of all, do you have memories of before that time when you were younger, before the age of 14, 15? And talk to us about, that moment in that doctor's office when you were sitting down and hearing this diagnosis and what's going through your mind.
I do have really fond memories. I have lots of vivid memories of being able to see when I used to play, when I was taught how to ride a bike, which I failed miserably at, by the way. I used to be a swimmer, and I really enjoyed the sea, the ocean, swimming. I used to actually compete nationally when I was a teenager before I lost my eyesight. And I remember lots of things, my parents' faces, my siblings' faces, my own face. I remember what I used to look like. Of course, I don't know what I look like right now, but I have very fond memories. And thanks. Thanks. I should hear that every morning. I'll carry it around with me every morning to hear that. Thank you. But yes, I carry those memories with me all the time so that I can just, it gives me fuel to continue when I do move around without my eyesight. And I always say that I love going to bed because when I go to sleep and I dream in color and absolutely clearly. So I still have, eyesight in that way. And being able to live on both sides of the coin, having a disability and not having a disability, it's really been able to teach me a lot of things. I have learned so much more about compassion, about patience with yourself, about being creative, about being a problem solver. When you can't do something one way, you have to find a way, whether it's through or around or under or over, you just have to find a way to push through. So it's really strengthened me, actually. And I say a lot that even though people say disability is a curse, I find it to have been a huge blessing. And I wouldn't have been able to even reach this point as a senator representing people with disabilities in Kenya and having passed the disability bill of 2025 if I didn't have a disability myself.
18 minutes past 8 Central African time. It is here on Africa Rise and Shine. We are in conversation as part of our Wednesday profile with Senator Crystal Asige. She's Kenyan, 34 years old, nominated for the 4th Senate of the 13th Parliamentary of Kenya to represent persons with disabilities and special interest groups. She's also a musician. She's an accessibility auditor and public speaker, inclusive mobility and transport practitioner. By the way, she's award-winning. We're going to touch on that as well. She's also diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. So you hear the diagnosis then of glaucoma, and then it starts to set in now. Your eyesight is you're losing it. How did you adjust then your life from that moment to living a full life? And you do live a full life now, to where you are now. I think we've lost Senator Crystal Asige on the line. We're going to try and get a hold of her again as we touch into some of her political work that she's done. Of course, as you heard, she signed the Persons with a Disability Bill into law with the President of Kenya currently, President William Ruto. And this was as early as this month, May 8th. Of 2025, creating history there. Let's see if we can try and get a hold of her on the lines again. I don't know what happened there. Okay. Senator, I see you still there. Yes, we lost you, but thanks so much for coming back. Let's talk about the transition now in terms of what you had to learn. And you must have felt like you are a child from scratch. After the diagnosis of glaucoma, then the onset of your loss of eyesight manifests, how you adjust.
Yes, so from the time I was sat in the doctor's office and he told me, okay, we've done a bunch of tests, because I did a bunch of tests for about 3 to 4 weeks in the UK. After struggling to see when I was in university, in the lecture hall, around dorms, I was really struggling. And my glasses, which I used to wear at the time, were not working the way they should. So I took myself for very many tests at the ophthalmologist in the UK. And he told me after a bunch of results came through that, hey, we've discovered that you have this thing called glaucoma. It has no cure, unfortunately, and because you are black, it is more aggressive in black Africans.
Really?
So he predicted that by around 24, 25, I would have lost all of my vision, because at the time I only had about like 70% when he was giving me that diagnosis. So from there, I spiraled a lot. I won't lie. I was looking at my friends in university, left and right of me, and thinking like, oh, you guys are all starting your lives. You know, you're at the beginning, at your prime years. And here I am being told that I'm going to have to start all over again in just a couple of years, which I had to do. I had to start again. I literally, like you said, went back to being a baby, having to learn how to dress myself, how to live on my own, how to chop onions and tomatoes, how to cook, you know, with a disability. All small things, while I looked at my peers who are now getting into their first jobs, their careers, getting married, having children, etc. So I felt very much like I was starting from zero. But I think, like I say, that really taught me how to not just learn, but unlearn and relearn.
Yes.
And that for me is a beautiful experience in life to be able to have, even though, of course, it's challenging and it's a pain in the behind a lot of the time. When you can't do something on your own, or you have to call someone just to tell you what spices you're throwing into your pot while cooking, it makes you feel very it just makes you feel alone a lot of the time. And I still struggle till today, but I definitely feel as though it has been a unique experience and has brought me to a place where I'm able to talk about and teach other people and say, hey, you know what? Don't feel like your challenge is insurmountable, because I've been able to do this with the mountain that's before me. And if I can do it, then you absolutely can.
Absolutely. And you're living a full life, a beautiful life. And that's what we all need to understand about people living with disabilities. So then in May, this month of the 8th, 2025, you with President of Kenya, William Ruto, signed the Persons with Disabilities Bill into law, a bill that was championed by you. What are some of the struggles that this moment has turned, or that moment turned, into victory for you and other persons living with disabilities that are covered under it?
Wow, there's so many provisions that I've been able to draft and put into that act. It's a 64-page document, so it's really long. But some of the highlights that people really have been contacting me and thanking me for is, number one, before this act of 2025, people with neurodiverse disabilities were never acknowledged or recognized in Kenya. So those with autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, things like that, people were never officially recognized in Kenya. So I've been able to insert that into the act. I've also been able to insert provisions around tax exemptions for parents and caregivers of PWDs, because as a PWD myself, I know exactly how it felt like to see my parents struggle to take me from appointment to appointment, medication to medication, treatment to treatment, and really they struggled financially and also emotionally. So I've been able to put that into the act that parents and caregivers of people with severe disabilities will be able to have or apply for tax exemption to the relevant Ministry of Finance. Also, I've been able to raise the retirement age for PWDs from 60 to 65, because as you will know, Asanda, many of us people with disabilities have so many barriers to education that you will find a 20-year-old who is in class 6, for example, because of their disability, because they started so late, and therefore they get into the workforce very late. And therefore, they need a few more years to be able to, build themselves and financially and etc. So I've been able to increase the retirement age to 65, and also provisions around the built environment, making sure that there is punitive action. If your building or your technology or your transport, if you're a PSV, is not catered and is not accommodative to PWDs, you are now going to be able to be fined under this new act. So people, it's no longer a question or a request, it's now a right under the PWD Act.
And previously in Kenya, there was the Persons with Disabilities Act number 14 of 2003. What shortcomings did you see here that made you think it's going to be necessary to now come up with this new act? You speak of tax rebates.
Yes, tax rebates were not in the previous act of 2003. And also the 2003 act was pre our Kenyan constitution. Our constitution is 2010. And so this act was not in line with our own constitution. So you see, there are many issues which I saw within just that discrepancy. Also, the 2003 act that I just finished, that I just repealed with my new act, was not in line with other instruments that Kenya is a signatory to. For example, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which came in 2008, and Kenya ratified to be a signatory to that. So you see, it was before the CRPD, it was before the Kenyan Constitution. So there are many things, as you can imagine, that were missing in terms of rights and freedoms. Also, in the old Act of 2003, there were no punitive action for discriminated against a PWD. So you could discriminate and the law will not tell you that you have to go to court or there'll be a fine or there'll be any kind of repercussion. So you see people were sort of like going around sort of unchecked for discrimination against PWDs with the old Act.
Kenya also has the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. So how will this new act now or new bill strengthen the functions of that?
Yes, there's many things that I've been able to improve with the function of the National Council, which takes care of PWDs, including the membership of the board, including some of their programming and activities, including their mandates, for example, to be able to audit a building and say, hey, build bank building or university campus. We have come, we've audited as a National Council your structure or your premises, and we have found that it's not accessible to people with disabilities. And therefore, they're able now to give said building a summons or a document saying this is what you should improve. And they give them as well a duration to make those improvements. And if that building or the management of said institution does not make those adjustments through that order, then they are able to, like I said, face punitive actions, which include a fine or taking them to court as well. So that is something that strengthens the council a lot because they didn't have much teeth before this act of 2025.
You were 2024 Times 100 Next honoree, congratulations, as well as Kenya's Top 40 Under 40 winner. What do these types of recognition mean for you?
Apart from just a personal highlight and a personal achievement, I think it means something greater, which is that through me, I want to be able to show people, not just people with disabilities, but people who are non-disabled in the country and outside of the country, that, hey, when you give people with disabilities a fair shake, when you give us a level playing field, we can achieve so much more than you could ever imagine. And being able to go to New York last year and being honored with a Time 100 on the Time 100 list next to fantastic people like Senegalese president, who is also a young activist, many innovators, scientists, musicians, athletes as well across the world. Being able to be on that list for me, I was like, wow. First of all, who knew that people in New York were looking at my work? First of all, as a small girl from Mombasa, Kenya. But second of all, it's like, hey, being put on this platform shows the world that when, like I said, you see and hear and understand and give opportunities to PWDs, we can actually, raise the bar really high. So I want it to be able to encourage young people, to encourage young girls with disabilities, to encourage anyone really who feels different, who feels unseen, who feels they're not being given a fair opportunity to say, you can do it. And if you just keep pushing, somebody in the right place will see you at the right time.
And I know there's already a lot on your plate, but I see you coming up with your own awards ceremony to uplift the dignity and the rights of persons living with disabilities in Kenya. I'm going to be there on the first awards ceremony and say, I told you so.
I would love you to be. I would love you to be. And actually, it's part of what I'm doing, not just trying to raise the flag high for disability and inclusion in Kenya, but I go around the continent as well, I've been to Zambia I've been to Nigeria. I'm also just about to get on a flight to go to Zimbabwe soon. And South Africa hopefully will be towards the end of the year. So I'm trying to, scream this message from the rooftops across Africa, not just in Kenya.
Awesome. We'll leave it there for today. And we should have an hour to talk to you, honestly. But this is broadcasting, so this is all the time we have. But we really appreciate your time again.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Look forward to speaking soon.
All right. Senator Crystal Asige speaking to us on the line there as our part of Wednesday Rise and Shine program, profile rather, that's part of our program. 31 minutes past 8 now, Central African time. Let's say good morning to Onel Nzinzi. News headline.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. South Africa's International Relations Minister, Ronald Lamola, says if the issue of Afrikaners comes up during President Cyril Ramaphosa and the U.S. President Donald Trump's meeting, they will produce evidence that white Afrikaners are not being persecuted in South Africa. Lamola and other ministers have accompanied President Ramaphosa to the United States to meet with Trump to mend relations between the two countries. A former Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Augustin Matata Ponyo, has been sentenced to a decade forced labor for corruption. Matata was found guilty of embezzling over $240 million of public funds by the Congolese Constitutional Court, alongside a former governor of the DR Congo Central Bank. And the International Committee of the Red Cross in Southern Africa says there are 23 active conflicts in Africa, some involving tribal and ethnic differences. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And now let's find out what's happening in the world of sports. In this hour, here's Mosebudi Makura with the details.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. For the final time this morning on Africa Rise and Shine, we'll start here. Dr. Danny Jordan, the president of the South African Football Association, has vowed to support Amajita as they aim to carry the momentum from the AFCON triumph into the FIFA World Cup later on this year. However, he was hesitant to promise any incentives at this time. The under-20 men's national team returned to the country on Tuesday morning after their 1-0 victory over Morocco, which also secured them the Continental Youth Tournament. As anticipated, Jordan was asked about just how much the prize money would be distributed and whether the players would receive the share. The SAFA president explained that the situation is more complex than it appears.
We have not received any money from CAF yet, and when we have the money, we will decide. One thing that we know, and that you know, South African football has not missed a single international match. We complied with our commitments. We even played in China. In the past, we didn't play in China. We played in China. We played in every single competition under both CAF and FIFA. And that means it's travel, accommodation, daily allowance, everything. And we fulfill our commitment. There's great respect for what South African football has achieved.
Meanwhile, Jordan has also urged PSL clubs to release players that coach Raymond Mdaka had to leave behind after their teams withdrew them in the build-up to this AFCON tournament. He hopes that the opportunity to play in the World Cup will encourage their participation.
This under-20 team, together with the players who are not there, and we hope that we'll have the full cooperation of our clubs. And if we give the coach all of the possibilities in terms of player availability, including those who play in Europe, Shande Campbell, and Bokasi, and Mopena, that we know we'll have a team that can compete with the best in the world. And we look forward to Chile and the World Cup.
Right, we'll stay on the continent after years of building, recalibrating, as well as coming agonizingly close. Mamelodi Sundowns may finally be on the cusp of reclaiming their place at the summit of African football. Now, the Brazilians are on the verge of lifting their first ever Total Energies CAF Champions League title. This is since 2016, and the evidence supporting their claim is more compelling than ever. The final is a two-legged affair, with the first leg set for the 24th of May this coming Saturday at Loftus Versfeld in the country's capital city, Pretoria, and then the decisive return leg taking place on the 1st of June in Cairo, Egypt, where the Egyptian Giants Pyramids FC will be hosting Sundowns. Having already conquered the South African domestic scene with an unprecedented 8th consecutive league title, Sundowns have now shifted all focus on bringing home the biggest prize in African club football. Further afield now, Kevin De Bruyne received an emotional farewell at the Etihad Stadium for the final time on Tuesday night. And the moment even brought manager Pep Guardiola to tears, who called it a sad day. The 33-year-old will go down in Manchester as a legend of Manchester City, and proclaimed that he will always be here after the announcement that a statue will be built in his honour outside of the stadium. Captain De Bruyne is set to depart at the end of the season and started his last home game in City's 3-1 victory over Bournemouth. Guardiola saying it was a sad day as he reflected on what has been an incredible career from Kevin De Bruyne.
They are connected, the people from Man City, with him, his family, and how much love. That is nice, everything we achieve. But when you live in a place like we have been a decade with this incredible much of love and respect and gratitude, there's nothing else better than that. So I'm part of that. Of course, the club will take the decision. I'm part of that, and it's a sad day, so we'll be missed. So there's no doubt about that.
And finally, Carlos Alcaraz arrives at Roland Garros brimming with confidence after taking down chief rival Yannick Sinner in Rome. But the defending champion expects the Italian to be even more tougher proposition after shaking off a rust following a doping ban. Alcaraz as well as Sinner will be on the opposite sides of the draw at the Spaniard, or rather as the Spaniard returned to second in the world this week following his Italian Open triumph, potentially also setting a stage for another blockbuster final between the two games' rising superstars. The 22nd-year-old Alcaraz has won 15 of the 16 matches on clay this season, triumphing at Monte Carlo as well as reaching the Barcelona final before going all the way in Rome after missing the Madrid Open with a thigh injury. Four-time Grand Slam champion Alcaraz believes the challenge of playing Sinner always brings the best out of him. It's 8:38 a.m. Central African Time. That's a wrap of your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or give us a call. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Thulisile Beda, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Thulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
Let's find out what's happening from the world of business. For the final time on Africa Rise and Shine on this Wednesday, here's Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. The University of South Africa, in partnership with the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, The government of Tanzania and the Mwalimu Nyerere Foundation will host the 15th annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania on Saturday. The theme of the lecture will focus on the state of the continent. Preceding this event, there will be a series of events, including the Blue Economy Roundtable that takes place in Dar es Salaam. Former President Thabo Mbeki addressed the delegates in this meeting, saying that the situation about the blue economy on the continent has been neglected and deprived Africa of an opportunity to grow its economy.
After Africa's independence during the 1960s, the continent paid minimum focus on the blue economy and said, imagine the situation if the continent had acted differently from the 60s onwards and really focused on this blue economy as we've defined it. You know, it's clear that here we are dealing with an area of socio-economic activity which is of great importance for the future of our continent. The situation hasn't changed much.
Analysts expect that South Africa's national budget will be passed following significant consultation amongst parties within the Government of National Unity. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will today make his third attempt at tabling the budget following a standoff over a VAT hike, which National Treasury has since withdrawn. Chief Economist at Investec, Annabel Bishop, says while the budget seeks to raise revenue, the government may also be looking to cut down spending and limit borrowing.
Looking forwards, South Africa is not expected to see significant tax increases either. Instead, the budget is likely to see most of the revenue needed raised from failure to give relief for bracket creep when people's salaries rise due to inflation-adjusted increases. Then, of course, if the individual does not see relief in terms of going into a higher bracket, they do end up being taxed more. Also on the cards potentially is a lift in the fuel levy, and these factors in the main, along with expenditure cuts, should provide a balanced budget.
Congolese minerals such as tungsten, tantalum and tin, which Kinshasa has long accused neighboring Rwanda of illegally exploiting, could be exported legitimately to Rwanda for processing under the terms of a peace deal being negotiated by the US. This comes as Washington pushes for a peace agreement between the two sides to be signed this summer, accompanied by minerals deals aimed at bringing billions of dollars of Western investment to the region. Elizabeth Mapari reports.
A government spokesperson for Congo, which has long said it wants to move away from raw exports and towards local processing, referred questions to the Foreign Ministry, which has not issued comment. A Congolese official speaking on condition of anonymity said no cooperation on minerals could happen without the withdrawal of Rwandan troops and their proxies, a reference to the M23 rebels, which controls more territory than ever in eastern Congo. For Rwanda, the negotiations could bring a massive inflow of cash that could help it clean up what has until now been a largely illicit sector of its economy.
Meanwhile, China's CMOC Group, the world's top cobalt mining company, has called on the Democratic Republic of Congo to lift a ban on exports of the battery metal, which is currently due to expire next month. Congo is the world's leading cobalt-producing country, and it is imposed the 4-month ban in February in an attempt to curb surpluses as cobalt prices touched 9-year lows of around $10 a pound or $22,000 a metric ton. Congo has kept the market guessing on its next steps when the ban ends on the 22nd of June. Sources say the government could extend the suspension and could also look at export quotas for the future. The European Union is planning to introduce a €2 flat fee on billions of small customs-free parcels sent directly to people's homes from China, including those from the online retailers Shein and Temu. Some of the revenues would cover the cost of the customs checks required by the growing volume of imports spurred by low-cost retailers, while the remaining money would go to the EU budget. The BBC's Klitsia Sala has the details.
Almost 5 billion small parcels were sent to the EU last year, most of them from China. None of them had to pay customs duties. This might change soon. EU officials claim many of these items are unsafe or fake and don't compete fairly with local products. They say the sheer volume of these parcels has created a huge workload for border control staff. The revenue from the new €2 levy would help tackle the issue.
Now for a look at our financial indicators this morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,600 naira 79. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 39. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 49. And Zambia, 27 kwacha 5. Moving on to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 65, Russia 80 rubles 54. In India, it's at 85 rupees 51, China 7 yuan 21, and South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 99 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Looking at commodities this morning, gold is trading at $3,301 and platinum at $1,047 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $66.37 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Buntle Hedbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
46 minutes past 8 Central African time. This will be now our final story for this Wednesday on Africa Rise and Shine. Let's look at Russia's Prosecutor General declaring Amnesty International an undesirable organization, in quotes, banning the global human rights group from operating in the country. In a statement on May 19th, authorities accused the UK-based group of promoting, and I quote, Russophobic, end quote, agendas, supporting extremist groups, and backing the Kiev regime. The move marks another step in Moscow's ongoing crackdown on civil society amid its war in Ukraine. For comment on this matter, we're joined on the line by Amnesty International's Eastern Europe and Central Asia Director, Marie Struthers. Marie, thank you for joining us, and how are you this Wednesday?
Very well, and thank you for the invitation.
We appreciate you making time. How do you respond to Russia's claims against your organization that, as they quote, you are an undesirable organization, end quote?
As you were saying in your introduction, the declaration of our organization as undesirable is part of a long-standing, very broad pattern of silencing any critical dissenting voices inside Russia, but also outside, on the vast repression against civil society that has been going on for 10 years at least. And that means silencing the voices of human rights activists, of lawyers, of independent journalists, of banning civil society organizations. It's all part of a strategy to prevent Russian voices from speaking freely about human rights violations that the Russian government has been committing repeatedly. These include the war crimes and crimes against humanity that the Russian armed forces have been committing since 2014 in Ukraine.
What does this ban mean for your work in Russia legally? Will it be now a criminal offense for any rights groups to associate with you on Russian matters?
To be honest, our office in Russia was effectively closed down very soon after the February 2022 full-scale invasion. It means that we were had our official registration removed by the Ministry of Justice, so we haven't been able to work freely in the country since that time. This particular decision means that those inside Russia who share amnesty information via social media or other means are subject first to an administrative offense, and if they repeat that sharing of amnesty information, can be subject to criminal prosecution. So it's really a blow, first and foremost, to those inside Russia who seek to promote and defend human rights. But we have been dealing with the consequences of acting outside the law because, as you might recall, it is a criminal offense to even call the war in Ukraine a war. In Russia, it is called a special military operation. So this is not so new for us, but a bit more new for those inside Russia who seek to protect human rights.
What about those outside of Russia who may retweet or share some of the work you do on social media platforms? Are they now also at risk of being targeted by the Kremlin administration?
In theory, in black and white, but the cases are few, and it is mostly aimed at those who distribute information in the Russian language. That is what we really see as the aim of this decision, is to limit the distribution of information in the Russian language. So yes, it is possible, and it does happen from time to time, but much more frequently inside Russia.
How will you support local activists now? For years you've released reports on Russia's attack on Ukraine. We don't want to call it a war, as you say, accusing it of crimes against humanity. Those reports cannot be forgotten. Would you say that this ban is too little, too late, and the world has already been exposed to what you wanted to know from your research and work?
Yeah. I don't think it's too little. I don't think it's too late. It's a sad development in the steady and broad repression of any independent reporting and promotion of fact-based information on Russia's human rights record. This will not stop us. We will be even more determined to continue reporting on the violations in Ukraine, and we will find ways. All of Russian civil society and those that support Russian civil society have found ways since the full-scale invasion and even before in 2014 to get the information across. So this is not new. We will double down our efforts and find new ways to make sure that Russians have access to justice, but in safety, of course.
And in your continued efforts to monitor human rights in Russia, how much of support from the international community will you need on that? Or do you feel, as Amnesty International, you can still do this on your own?
We're a global international movement, so de facto. We are international. We're supported by at least 10 million people across all the continents of the world. And I feel that this decision will only reinforce support for a global movement such as Amnesty, because, as you said, it's a well-known fact. The daily violations being committed inside Russia and outside by Russia. And by the way, we do believe this decision was taken first and foremost in retaliation for reporting on the crackdown on independent journalists and human rights activists in Russia, but equally for our constant and deep reporting on Ukraine.
How would you convince funders to not allow this banning and negative judgment against you to affect the much-needed funding for Amnesty International that's very much needed when it comes to relief efforts?
Oh, I don't think our funders are naive and are very well of all the steps that the Russian government has taken, at least since 2014, when it first passed the foreign agent law, and then followed very quickly in 2015 by this law on undesirable organizations. We've been supported all along, and I think this will be viewed as an opportunity to support the dwindling number of voices that are committed to reporting on the human rights situation in Russia. So I think, conversely, this will encourage supporters.
As we speak of support, Human Rights Watch, another international rights group, has added its voice to these latest developments, calling the ban Russia's ambition to hide the truth about human rights violations. Also, independent group the International Service for Human Rights say this is a criminalization of Amnesty International by Russia. How do you view this support?
We welcome it, and I think that's exactly well said. This is an attempt to hide information from, first and foremost, from the Russian people about their government's human rights record, but also globally about activities that Russia is undertaking in Ukraine and has in the past elsewhere. So we welcome that support and agree with it.
What message do you have for Russian citizens who are now concerned about human rights? They're sitting within the countries or the confines of the borders, and they don't know what will happen from now on.
As I said before, we will double our efforts to find the ways to cover the violations that the Russian government is undertaking, deliver it safely as we can to those who want to be informed and exposed to this record of human rights, and we will not stop in our struggle to bring to justice all of those who are responsible for, amongst state officials and decision makers, for human rights violations. It's really, as I was saying before, a sadness for the Russian people that this additional measure is being taken to silence their voices and to block their access to fact-based information about human rights violations that their government is undertaking.
Well, thanks again for your time, Marie. We'll leave it there for today.
Thank you very much.
That's Amnesty International's Eastern Europe and Central Asia Director Marie Struthers talking to us on the line about Russia's recent decision, or specifically the Prosecutor General in Russia having declared Amnesty International an undesirable organization and then banning the global human rights group from operating in the country.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
On our social media platforms, we always invite you to speak to us with your questions, your comments at Channel Africa 1. Various comments have come through today. So the question we had on Rise and Shine today was, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is, of course, to meet US President Donald Trump today. The two leaders are to discuss mending relations. And the question was, what do you think will happen at this meeting? Some Facebook comments. Anderson Kapalamula, thank you for getting in touch with us, saying it shows that it won't be easy for Africa to break free. When Traore refused the invitation, others were pleading for forgiveness. He will come back with stipulations giving them consolation and a lot of money. And Joseph CM says, has he gone to apologize or request for the cowards to return? ? All right, well, those are your comments, and thank you so much for sharing them. You can do that again tomorrow as we pose our questions. You can see our questions on X, on Facebook, as well as Instagram on Rise and Shine. When I leave here, Palesa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama will be taking over with On the Move, and she's here to tell us what we can expect. Good morning on this Wednesday, the 21st.
Good morning, Asanda. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Doing good today. Today on the Move, do you have a best friend?
Yes.
Okay.
How long? My sister is my best friend.
No, not that best friend.
But she's
another
my best
one.
Friend.
Is she?
She is.
Okay. Well, that makes it easier sometimes, right? But of course, best friends are people that are quite integral in our lives. They're important to have, and it's someone that you can really trust. But if you've heard of the term love bombing, it's usually a term that's used in romantic relationships, but apparently it can exist in friendships too. So how can you tell if a friend, maybe not your best friend, but a potential friend or a friend is love bombing you? And why would they do that? Because it is a form of manipulation, and it also might be quite toxic in the future. So we're finding out how you can identify a love bombing friendship. We'll be joined by a relationship coach Tshidi Letwana, as well as a clinical psychologist Gitu Medzi in the first hour of the show. And then we're having a conversation with one of our own SABC broadcasters. Her name is Ntombi Meso from Radio 2000, but we're not talking to her about her career. We're having a conversation about colorism pending over a release of her book, book that's coming out in June. It's a children's book that is quite interesting, that highlights colorism on the African continent after her own experiences as a young girl facing colorism, especially as a dark-skinned girl. And the name of the children's book is I Am Lovely and Dark. It's a beautiful book of affirmation, and it has affirmation cards in there as well, where young girls can affirm their beauty and affirm who they are through the book. So that's quite
beautiful.
interesting. Yeah,
they need to affirm themselves so they don't end up love bombing people in their friendships later in life.
Exactly.
We need to tackle these self-esteem issues early on. Interesting one there on love bombing. Yeah, I can see how it can play out as well. So that's coming up on the move here on Channel Africa. Stay tuned for that. As for me, I'll be back with you tomorrow 6 till 9. Peter's still away until next week, but we'll be crossing over to him there in Tanzania to give us an update on that Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture. It's 9 o'clock. Goodbye from me, Asanda Beda, and over to you, Onele Nsinsi, with our news headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Looking at your top stories, South African delegation aware of the task ahead as they meet with U.S. President today. And the UN receives permission from Israel for a further 108 trucks to enter Gaza. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. South Africa's International Relations Minister, Ronald Lamola, says if the issue of Afrikaners comes up during President Cyril Ramaphosa and the U.S. President Donald Trump's meeting, they will produce evidence that white Afrikaners are not persecuted in South Africa. Lamola and other ministers have accompanied President Cyril Ramaphosa to the United States to meet with Trump to mend relations between Washington and Pretoria. Lamola says the country has a constitution that recognizes everyone who resides within the borders of South Africa.
There is no evidence to back such. Our stats are them, evidence based in terms of the police statistics. There is no law in South Africa that is specifically persecuting or targeting white Afrikaners. But there is a constitutional imperative that is there for transformation in the country, which is in the interest of the whole nation, for nation building. That is a constitutional imperative that is in the preamble, that is in the various laws of our country.
International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola says other ministers are also part of this visit. He says President Ramaphosa is aware of the task ahead.